Chapter 530. She sneakily checked for directions on the GPS he was given and picked a location in Region 32 to move to. Gustav traveled halfway across the region, going past several streets before he arrived in front of what seemed like a pub. This place was the combination of a restaurant, a bar, and a lounge. It was quite massive with over 20 stories and looking quite luxurious as well. It was called the El Caso's Place, and people could be seen going in and out of the place. It was very lively even though this was a period of war. This place was obviously a place to come have fun as lots of ladies dressed in raunchy outfits could be seen. Guards were positioned at the entrance, and most of the people coming in had luxurious clothing on. Big bald men with potbellies having 3 or more girls in their company, which showed some kind of wealth. Gustav moved towards the entrance and walked past the guards without any issues. They didn't stop him from going, and neither did they stop anyone, because no ordinary person would be in this region in the first place. Gustav moved straight towards the reception desk and registered for a place to sleep in for the night. Sleeping here for a night was up to 2,000, but money wasn't really an issue for Gustav. The only problem was he had limited cash stored in his storage device, which meant that after one more day he wouldn't be able to afford this again unless he made use of his debit card. Using a debit card in this place risked exposing him, so it wasn't an option. He had to think of alternative to handle the future situation. He later moved towards room 207, which was on the 17th floor. Gustav laid on his bed after arriving in the room few minutes back. It was quite large and luxurious enough, but that wasn't the purpose of getting it. Gustav checked his energy level and noticed that he had used quite a lot today. He had only 40% left. It had been a very long day filled with multiple events. He needed to recharge now, so he could continue his investigation later without a hitch. He devised his next plans while waiting for his energy to get replenished. You deactivated the seal again? Young miss, that is another breach of contract. A middle-aged looking man with multiple small diamond-like shards embedded into his face voiced out with a tone of annoyance towards the young lady in front of him. Yeah? I completed you guys' job for you again. What are you getting so worked up about, old geezer? You should be thanking me. Miss Amy responded with an unbothered look while gesturing at the group of masked people tied together on the ground. They were currently in a location where only convoys could be seen moving around the place, along with MBO officers moving from place to place with different kinds of technological machinery walking as well. It seemed to be an MBO base of sorts. You're not allowed to deactivate your seal without permission. You caused a scare all across the world. Even Mac doesn't use such amount of power when in the Earth's atmosphere. This middle-aged man happened to be among the higher-ups, Grand General Isaacek. His rank was before that of the great commanders. I don't hear appreciation. Not only did they fail to get the culprits almost managed to launch another attack if not for my intervention. KSK, the MBO had truly degraded with you airheads in position of authority. Miss Amy chided mercilessly, not minding Grand General Isaacek's status. How dare you? Wait till I report this blunder to the great commanders, he voiced out before stomping off. That's pretty much your only option since you can't do nothing about it, Miss Amy voiced out to his hearing, causing his forehead to twitch repeatedly as he moved away. Even though he had an higher rank that she did, he was among the Grand Generals that put up a lot of courage before speaking to her. They all genuinely feared her after witnessing the things she had done. The entire Sahara Desert would have been blown away if she had not controlled her power when descending, and the Grand General knew that if she willed to, the entire base would be destroyed in an instant. So even if he was putting up a tough act because of his ego, he was also trying not to piss Miss Amy off completely, especially when the only person who could go toe-to-toe with her was currently not in the galaxy. Miss Amy put a finger in her ear and rubbed it gently with a look of discomfort before she started walking away. So noisy. Cleaning up for you guys every time, and this is what I get in return, she muttered just before pausing in front of the group of 20 who were tied up together. These masked men began to tremble in fear as they noticed her presence. So you guys really wanted to bite more than you could chew? Her eyes turned dark as she voiced out. I'll leave it to them to get answers out of you. I just might end up slaughtering you all if I conduct the interrogation myself, Miss Amy added before she resumed walking away. A smile appeared on her face as she remembered something. You're doing good, kid. Let's see how you'll take care of the situation within the city, she mumbled before entering into a building on the other end. The next morning arrived, and it had officially been a day since Gustav got here. A day spent here seemed like a week to him. It was no simple thing to be in the midst of a way. Around midnight, the officers from the base in Ruhagi City reached out to him through the communication device to ask for a daily report. Chapter 531. Gustav spent about 30 minutes giving a brief rundown of what he had encountered on his first day here. He mentioned the fight he got into but didn't explain the details, giving them the idea that it was an inescapable battle. He mentioned getting information from one of the groups. Still, he didn't really tell them that he used anyone's identity, and he finally explained to them that he was currently within Region 32 looking for clues. They mentioned that Region 30 was not among the suspected spots chosen. Nevertheless, Gustav explained to them what he had heard once again, which made him come check this place out. After giving him a little advice, they ended the communication and left Gustav to do as he willed. Everything was in his hands anyways. It's not like they could come here to take over the case themselves. Gustav had spent the entire night channeling his bloodline even in this strange place. Luckily, he was able to complete his daily quest yesterday while on the move to this place. Now that the next morning had arrived, it was time for him to gather information. Gustav moved out of his room a few minutes later after taking his bath and changing clothes. The morning on the streets of Region 32 was quite peaceful. Almost everyone had rides moving across the place, and only very few people could be seen walking on the road. Gustav wanted to move to a busy area beside the place he had resided for the night. While walking on the way, he would occasionally change his identity before moving towards any place that had more activity than others. Hours went by, and noon arrived in a bit. Gustav had spent the last 5 hours moving from place to place and gathering as much information as he could. He went around the entire region about 3 times, trying to see if he would notice any suspicious movements or locations. To his disappointment, he found no such thing. The entire region was so peaceful, and it seemed like no kind of transaction was going on in seclusion. Truly, this place was void of war due to 2 of the 8 groups managing this place. The group Gustav had clashed with the day before was one of them that governed this region, and according to the information Gustav had gathered so far, they were on the sides of the world government. Gustav didn't really blame any side of the groups for the war, but witnessing what had happened the day before with the family he saved, Gustav held a grudge for this group. Since there was a possibility of Sahil hiding out in this place, Gustav realized he might have to make use of Lucius' identity again. He had figured out the location where the members of Zalabins were situated in this section of the city. Gustav's next plan was to spy on them and figure out if any of their plans connected with his. He knew Sahil wouldn't be hiding out in any of these groups' official locations within this region, especially when it was said that whoever their dealer was also sold arms to the other side. If he was with them, Commandant Fabian wouldn't need to send any troops from over there to come and find him here. Understanding all this, Gustav initiated his plan to infiltrate into the base of the Zalabins in this region and tap their conversations. Cognitive concealment has been activated. Making his presence disappear, Gustav dashed across the region and arrived behind a 24-story building in a few. He leaped upwards after checking the surroundings and arrived at the top of the building, which happened to be empty. From there, Gustav hid at a corner of the building and changed his outfit into that of a Zalabin troop. Aside from Lucius' outfit, he also took a normal Zalabin troop outfit which he kept in his storage device just in case. Lucius' uniform had a small silver star in the middle of his chest, which Gustav guessed signified authority, so he didn't put it on. Using the normal outfit would make him look like a normal troop which wouldn't attract attention. Gustav found his way into the building by jumping towards the side and landing on a balcony. Although it was locked up, there was a small space on the windows. Gustav made use of size manipulation to slip in and found his way to the corridors. This was when he found the place a bit busier than he expected. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Other people dressed just like him with the dark outfit, vest, and helmet could be seen walking around. Gustav asked for directions to the leader's office after finding out how the rankings in this place went. Arriving there, he was told the leader wasn't in at the moment, and he would have to come back. Gustav already knew this, which was why he came. He decided to approach here in the first place. Asking for the restroom on this floor, Gustav moved there quickly. He made use of another invisibility chip before dashing out. He was able to break into the leader's office by picking up the key card placed on the secretary's table without her knowledge. All she felt was an immense wind blowing across the place, which caused her to get disoriented as multiple pieces of paper flew across the place. Gustav used this to his advantage, opening the office door and getting in quickly to place the tapping device underneath the office chair. It only took less than 10 seconds for all this to be done, and he was out of sight by the time the winds had calmed. The lady at the desk looked confused as she picked up the files that had fallen. After the invisibility wore out, Gustav made his way out of the building, still using the identity of the dead subordinate Lucius. Akim, a loud voice suddenly called out to him the instant he stepped out of the building. Chapter 532. Akim. A loud voice suddenly called out to him the instant he stepped out of the building. Gustav turned to the side with a look of confusion and spotted a beautiful-looking young woman with short green hair headed towards him from the other end of the street. She was also dressed in a black outfit, but unlike Gustav, she had her helmet taken off. She held it by her side as she approached Gustav. Gustav turned to look forward and started walking. Akim, where are you going? Wait for me, she voiced out while increasing her movement speed, and arrived behind Gustav before placing her hand on his shoulder from behind. We weren't supposed to see each other till next week. Why did you come here? She asked while moving to Gustav's front. Did you miss me that much? She asked with a seductive voice while reaching out to hug Gustav. Gustav pulled her from his embrace and spoke. I think you have the wrong person, he voiced out before proceeding to walk past her. Come on, Akim. Are you still mad at me? She asked while still following Gustav. No, I'm not. I don't even know you. You have the wrong person, Gustav responded while still walking forward. That's harsh, she said with a crestfallen tone, but still kept following Gustav. New quest has been issued. Information. Help comfort the poor lady. Rewards. Plus 200, 000 EXP. God eyes level up. Gustav suddenly paused his steps as he noticed these new notifications. The hell is this? How do I comfort her? Gustav wondered as he turned to stare at the lady beside him, who also paused when he did. What exactly do you want from me? Gustav asked with an intrigued tone, hoping to find some clues so as to how to finish this quest. Come on, Akim, stop being like this and let's go somewhere private. I miss you too. Your touches, your kisses. I love you, she said with shimmering eyes. This is gonna be a problem. I think I should skip this quest, Gustav said internally. Hidden punishments. The system suddenly voiced internally with a light chuckle. You even changed your voice trying to trick me, but you've forgotten that I patched this uniform for you right here. The young woman touched the neck area of Gustav's outfit as she spoke. Even though it's barely visible since you said it yourself that I'm good at this stuff, I would still recognize it anywhere. Along with your stature, of course, she laughed lightly after getting to this point. Underneath the helmet, Gustav's eyes widened with a look of understanding. So that's why? This was now a situation where he had no choice but to play along, or he'd be risking exposure. There was literally proof on the outfit that it belonged to this Akim. And from the looks of things, Akim and this unknown lady were in a relationship. Akim was already dead since Gustav killed him a day before, but luckily Gustav remembered the face underneath the helmet and slowly started transforming to it. It was a dark-skinned face, attractively shaped with a buzz cut. His voice tone, this was the only issue Gustav had now. He never heard this dude speak, so he had no idea how he was going to mimic it. I had an incident in the last mission which affected my voice. I'm not doing this on purpose. Luckily, Gustav's already made the tone of his voice raspy right from time. Oh my. Akim, are you okay? She asked with a look of concern while taking off his helmet. Gustav had already allowed some lines of injury to appear across his face, so the instant she did that, she could see Akim's face with a lot of injuries. She held his face with concern and pulled him into her embrace again. I'll ask Father to let you stay here with me. I can't bear to lose you, she voiced out before leaning in and placing her lips on Gustav's. The people passing by had smiles on their faces as they noticed the couple kissing. Gustav had to wing it and pretend as he kissed her back. Akim, you seem more passionate than before. You used to be so bad at kissing. she voiced out after withdrawing from him. Gustav didn't know how to respond to that. He only had his first kiss a few days back, and here he was kissing a random stranger that he was only just meeting for the first time. Quest completed. He noticed the notification appear in his line of sight. So you just wanted me to kiss a complete stranger, huh? Gustav voiced out internally. Don't pretend like you didn't enjoy it. The system responded with a snicker. Gustav. Minutes later, Gustav and this unknown lady found themselves in a luxurious apartment. They'll be right back after taking a shower, she said while winking at Gustav. The instant she went in, Gustav bolted out the door and found his way out of the building. He quickly moved towards the nearest restroom and changed his outfit while he transformed into the look he initially used on his first day here. An oblong-shaped face with a mustache and small beard makes him look older. Gustav slowly walked out of the restroom a few moments later with a look of relief while moving towards the room he had booked a night before. He had decided never to use that uniform again and also made his stature different from Akim. He was sure Akim was cursing him from the afterlife right now. Not only did he murder him, but he also kissed his girl, and they would have gone further if he didn't find his way out of there. In a few minutes, Gustav arrived back in the room he booked and sat on the bed as he brought out some equipment. Tri-Eye, a small disc-looking device, made a weird noise as it projected a black and white X-ray-like projection of the floor where the leader was located in the Zalabin's Region 32 base. Chapter 533. It displayed the office along with the secretary as well as other people moving across the floor. It also projected sound, so Gustav had no issue in hearing what was going on. Now his next move was to sit and wait. Just who was that lady? She strikes me as someone with a kind of power. Gustav wondered as this was what his intuition told him. He remembered seeing a picture frame of a man in the apartment. He figured he was probably a family member since Akim was who she was in a relationship with. I ran a background check on the database of the Zalabins. The system suddenly spoke. You can do that? Gustav asked. In the greatest computerized-based machine in all of existence. I can do that, and even more. I just chose not to most times so you can figure things out yourself, Dumbo. The system voiced out. Fair point, Gustav stated. Get over here, the system voiced out, and in the next instant, Gustav felt his mind being pulled into another realm as his vision turned completely white, and his eyes glowed crimson for a few moments. His mind was pulled into another place, and he found himself in a wide hall. The hall was immensely large and wide. The beginning and the end could not be seen, but there seemed to be spots that had different kinds of things placed around. Far behind, Gustav could see pillars of different sizes. But these pillars weren't really pillars. They were actually rectangular in shape and transparent. Some reddish liquid was stored within these pillars. Every pillar had pints of these reddish liquids stored in a lined-up format. To the left, Gustav could see things like shelves lined up in rows and columns. These shelves had scroll-like objects placed within them. He instantly recognized this place to be the system's inner space. A short girl with a unicorn-like horn in the middle of her forehead, sporting long pinkish hair, could be seen walking towards him from up ahead. It was the system astral body form, just as Gustav recalled. She was clad in a long whitish glowing gown. The gown was so long that it swept across the floors as she walked forward. She looked to be around 12 years of age with her small stature, but her eyes looked extremely sharp. She looked extremely cute. Innocent-looking face, but very dirty tongue. Gustav voiced out the instant she arrived in front of him. Shut up to him. Hard-looking guy, but still a virgin, she responded before bursting into laughter. Gustav could not help but get annoyed whenever the system spoke. 90% of her words were always aimed at trying to discredit him in one way or the other. In fact, staring at her right now made him feel really ticked off. His usually unbothered demeanor was nowhere to be found right now. Anyways, let's get to business, she said before snapping her fingers. A projection of the lady Gustav met earlier, along with the picture he found, appeared. These two are father and daughter, the system began explaining. The father happens to be a sibling to the head of the Zalabins, so this lady, Lydia, is the nephew of the most powerful person in the Zalabins, she added. Oh, this could have gone really bad then, Gustav muttered with a contemplative look. Or I can really use this to my advantage, he added with a slight look of conflict. Tyon. You don't need to use her right now since the people Commander Fabian sent over haven't arrived yet. Besides, if you want to make use of her, you might have to use your body, and it is even more risky when you have no information whatsoever on Akeem, the system analyzed. Exactly. If I'm going to make use of her, it has to be in extreme situations. For now, I can continue with the investigation on my own, Gustav stated. The system showed him a few more clips before sending his mind back to his body. Gustav's sight returned back to his room. That was a bit rough. Anyways, let's continue, Gustav muttered as he stared at the black and white projection. After some time, he decided to check out the new features for God Eyes. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav's sight instantly turned red and blue as his sight phased through the entire building. Wow, Gustav exclaimed as he zoomed in and noticed that he could see through the entire next 3 streets. All the people moving, the internal structure of the walls, and even people having S*X on the top floors. He quickly zoomed his eyes out as he spotted the couple making out. I shouldn't have seen that, Gustav mumbled before turning to another side to continue examining the new features of God Eyes. Seconds turned into minutes, minutes turned into hours, and hours turned into an entire day gone by. The office he tapped hadn't even been opened once throughout the entire day, and just like that, today would be Gustav's 3rd day arriving here. Gustav was starting to develop an idea of wanting to move across the region again, inspecting places while using God Eyes, but he didn't know if he might miss something while being away. The footage being displayed was under recording, and he'd be able to rewind and check if something happened, but he felt that a situation that needed urgent response might occur, and then he'd be too late in making a move. Gustav decided to wait for a little while and move out when it was noon. Time went by, and in a flash, noon arrived. Still seeing the office was empty as usual, Gustav prepared to leave his room. Getting to the shower, he took his bath and did other necessities in less than 2 minutes before changing his outfit. Just as he prepared to leave, he noticed the arrival of a group of people on that particular floor being displayed in the footage. Who are these guys? Gustav noticed they were 6 in number and moved closer to stare at the black and white projection properly. The secretary instantly stood to her feet and bowed in respect as this group of men arrived before her desk. Finally, Gustav said internally. Chapter 534. The secretary instantly stood to her feet and bowed in respect as this group of men arrived before her desk. Finally, Gustav said internally. Gustav zoomed in the black and white footage on a particular one of them, who he recognized to be this region-based leader. He passed down some instructions to the secretary before moving into the office with the others. The office was like a living room with sofas surrounding a luxurious-looking table. This group of 3 all found places to sit the moment they moved in and began to converse with each other. Region Leader Khan, I'm sure you know by now that we were sent by Commander Fabian, the one on the left voiced out in a reminding tone. Of course, he mentioned to me that you are to pass a message to the arms dealer, Leader Khan, who was seating on the other end of the table, voiced out. Exactly, we need to meet with him as soon as possible since the fate of this war mostly lies on his method of arms distribution, the one on the other side added. We can't have him selling to the other side. The one on the left voiced out again. I understand. He is truly in this region, but we have no idea where his exact location is, Leader Khan stated. How good must this dude's cover-up be that it's hard for even the group in authority here to locate him? Gustav said internally as he continued paying attention to their conversations. Before the 2 who were sent over from Commander Fabian's place could respond to that, Leader Khan spoke. However, he did give us a means of contacting him, Leader Khan added before bringing out a small rectangular-shaped device. The 2 visitors fixed their eyes on this device as he brought it out. Oh, so we can contact him and set up a meeting using this device. The one on the left voiced out in understanding. Precisely, let's do that now, Leader Khan stated before tapping a particular button on the device. Trigaya, a weird flat and long beeping sound rang out as they waited. After a few seconds, it stopped, and the leader proceeded to tap it again. After 2 more tries, it made a weird connecting sound, and a voice was heard next. Mr. Khan, I'm sure I just delivered some arms to you recently. Are you in need of more? A deep voice with a weird accent could be heard coming from the device. Ha ha ha, arms are never enough, my friend, but this time we need something different from you. Leader Khan responded. Slick SL, we were sent here by our commander to request for you to stop selling arms to the enemy side. The one on the left voiced out. So you guys figured out that it was me? And I was careful enough to sell different brands and models. Where did I slip up? The voice from the other side sounded a bit surprised as it responded. Looks like my theory was right, Gustav said internally as he heard this. He was the one who informed Commander Fabian about this without any proof, because this was what he suspected after analyzing a lot of things. The two sent by Commander Fabian stared at each other for an instant before turning to face the device again. Well, we wish for you to stop selling to the other side, so their troops can be weakened. We can easily win this war in no time. The one on the left voiced out again. Ha ha ha. A small laugher was heard from the other end for a few seconds before the voice responded. Why should I? A longer period of war for me means more profit, and might I remind you all that I'm a businessman. I put business first, he stated. Slick SL, might I remind you that you're in our territory. Selling to our enemies as well isn't a very nice thing to do, especially to people who have treated you well, Leader Khan said with a solemn tone. And I really appreciate your good deeds, but like I said, my business comes first, Slick SL said with a slightly appreciative tone. We understand you very well, Mr. Slick, which is why we want to have a sit down with you. We will make you an offer that is good enough to stop you from selling to the other side. The man on the left spoke again. An offer. Are you sure it can meet my expectations? The voice asked from the other side. Very much certain. Commander Fabian never disappoints. The man on the left responded again. How about 2 days from now? The voice on the other end proposed. Sounds good. Location? They asked again. I'll let you know on the morning of that day. I expect no foul play from your end, but just in case, I will bring enough protection from my side. The moment after the person finished voicing out, the communication was cut. The three men in the office stared at each other before Leader Khan spoke. I suppose you two will be here for some time then. Let me get you settled in a comfortable and safe environment, Leader Khan voiced out before proceeding to use another communication device to contact someone. We appreciate the gesture, Region Leader Khan, both men voiced out with an appreciative tone. At this point, Gustav had stood to his feet and was standing by the side of the bed, contemplative gaze, while staring at a piece of information displayed in holographic format. Turns out it was truly Sahil, Gustav muttered while staring at a list. Alias, SL, Slick SL, Shadow Distributor. Sahil had different names he went by, and Slick SL just happened to be one of them. It had only been 3 days, and Gustav was already on his trail. Now the next step was to implement a good plan and make sure he didn't slip from his hands. Chapter 5:35. Also, he had to get hold of the location in the next 2 days when Sahil contacted them again. Who are these two that were sent by Commander Fabian? Gustav wondered as he stared at the projection. He noticed that they were leaving the office with a woman who seemed to be guiding them. Gustav quickly looked around his room. He wanted to leave and get over to that part of the region, but going through the elevators would waste time. He moved towards the left where the balcony was located and stared at the street up ahead. It was up to 500 feet in height, but this was nothing Gustav hadn't handled before. In fact, he had dealt with worse. Gustav leaped through the balcony, traveling several hundred feet in midair, as his body flew above several buildings in the process. Silent advancement has been activated. As he landed on a building in front, there was barely any sound. Swoosh! Dashing forward, he leaped above several buildings in a diagonal format as he traveled towards the Zalabans region base. After a minute, he arrived before the street where the building was located and started walking forward. He instantly spotted the two men coming out of the building with the woman in front of them, who gestured towards a luxurious-looking hovercar parked by the side. Gustav moved to the side and kept watching them sneakily as the engine started and zoomed off across the street. They drove at moderate speed, so Gustav was able to follow them with sprint. Swoosh! He was barely visible when he moved across the street, so he didn't garner attention, especially when the streets were scanty as well. As Gustav followed after them from a good distance while activating God Eyes, which could now pin onto targets, he noticed that they were headed in a familiar direction. In about a minute more, Everything clicked as they arrived right in front of the same location Gustav was currently residing, El Caso's place. This was the only part of this region that was always bubbling with activity. Beautiful ladies dressed in raunchy and baiting outfits moved about the place. As both men who were sent here to see Commander Fabian got off the vehicle, some of the ladies in the vicinity started winking at them and giving them all sort of seductive looks. The woman who was leading them stared at these ladies with disgust as she walked into the place with the two who ignored the ladies. "Maybe we can have some fun later. This place doesn't seem bad," the one on the left said to the other one after they walked in. "Well, we have 2 days of freedom, so yeah, it won't be bad to have a little fun while we wait," the other one responded with a low tone. The woman leading them heard their words and thought, "Aren't they both married? Men will always be pigs." She arrived before the reception and conversed with one of the females at the desk while gesturing at the 2 males behind before receiving a gold card. They proceeded to move towards the elevator area. Just as they got in and moved to the side, waiting to be teleported to their floor, Gustav suddenly moved to the same elevator. The men stared at the young man with a mustache and small beard for a moment, wondering how someone could be so bold as to enter the same elevator with a Zalabin. Gustav nodded at them. "Good day, sirs. Good day, ma'am," he voiced out respectfully before moving towards the side, acting like he wasn't even there. After observing him for a few moments, they concluded that Gustav was just a clueless nobody and didn't see it as a big deal to let him stay in the same teleportation elevator with them, especially when the place was big enough. Zing, a few moments later, they were teleported to the last floor, which happened to be the most luxurious one. Only a few spaces were available here, but every room was like an entire house with multiple relaxation centers, and people had better services. Room 12B was stated on the gold card, and it was just down the beautiful-looking hallway. At this point, Gustav didn't keep following them. He moved towards a side of the hallway that led to the top of the lounge building and stood there. God Eyes has been activated. His eyes zoomed through and focused on the 3 headed towards the left. Normally, they would be out of sight, but God Eyes was just too powerful now. After noting their room, Gustav moved back to his own room. The issue now was he would be kicked out of his room by nightfall since that was when his accommodation period would expire. He had put the first phase of his plans into motion, but to continue, he would have to remain in this place. Gustav's hair slowly morphed back into its dirty blonde color as his face transformed as well. His initially oblong-shaped face returned back its usual shape with his well-outlined jawline and charming young facial features, along with his attractive lips. Gustav's height reduced a little back to 511, with his slightly muscular frame returning as well. He proceeded to change his clothes and back to the MBO uniform before reaching for his left wrist. Tap. Truant, a silver-colored bracelet appeared on his wrist with 4 blue bars. "Time to find out if this will work," Gustav said internally while tapping on it several times. A circular blue, glowing icon appeared after a few moments, and Gustav proceeded to tap it. Initiating spatial jump, a computerized voice rang out just before a blinding flash of light surrounded Gustav. Truinen. Gustav noticed the vicinity narrowing as he found his body being sucked into a tunnel of whitish light. Zing, in the next moment, he found himself standing in the midst of a forest area. Chapter 536. Zing, in the next moment, he found himself standing in the midst of a forest. Gustav looked around, and on the right side, he could see have trees that depicted a part of the forest that was decimated. Turning to look behind him, he could see hundreds of feet away, a clear space where different sizes of tents were erected. This was the same place he arrived in on the first day, the base within one of the forests in Ruhuggy City. It worked, but not entirely accurate in its coordinates. Gustav muttered as he stared at where his personal tent was located. The tent where he slept on his first day here was where he had used it as a checkpoint, yet he was teleported hundreds of feet in front. Maybe it's an interference from the city's dome. Gustav felt this was the only explanation that made sense. Officer Millie Brown, who happened to be moving around at that time, turned to stare at the forest area as her eyes squinted. After a few moments, she turned back around. "I guess it was nothing," she muttered while letting her guard down and moving away. Gustav, who was 100 feet away, was hiding behind a tree as he turned to the side to look in her direction. After confirming that she was out of sight, He slowly moved forward while activating a skill. Cognitive concealment has been activated. His presence instantly disappeared as he dashed across the forest a moment later. Gustav traveled towards the city and arrived there in about a minute. He didn't want to stir any drama or bring attention to himself, so he quickly moved towards the closest bus stop. Gustav boarded the transport and headed towards the closest bank. Arriving at the biggest bank in the city, Gustav brought out his debit card. This was the first time he would be using it in a month. He headed towards the nearest private withdrawal booth and proceeded to check his balance first. Name: Gustav Crimson. Balance: $39,007,892. Gustav's eyes widened slightly as he spotted the balance. It's only been about 7 months. How did it get this high? He muttered with a surprised expression. Looks like things are going well in Plankton City, Gustav thought. That was the only explanation for this. He only just created the organization and explained to them what was meant to be done. It looked like his workers had been doing well. Gustav remembered them, along with Angie's father and his partnership with Sergon. I should try visiting them after checking up on Boss Danzo, Gustav thought. It would be nice to see the progress of everything he started personally. Gustav proceeded to withdraw a large sum of money and stacked his storage device with them. This way, he wouldn't need to worry about using cash in Region 32 since he couldn't afford to use his card. Leaving a trail or any form of connection behind was dangerous. A few moments later, Gustav moved out of the bank and proceeded to start completing his daily routine. He had already completed one. Now only 2 were left. Break into a secure facility and break out without arousing any suspicions. Gustav read the second daily task. Did you forget that I now have quite a number of invisibility buttons with me? This can be finished easy, Gustav said to the system as he moved away from the bank area. Minutes later, Gustav found himself at the vault of a bank, staring at a massive-looking diamond that kept oozing out energy. This is tempting, Gustav said as he moved closer to the diamond. The entire vault only had about 2 or 3 more valuable items within, but this one seemed to be the most valuable item from Gustav's analysis. In fact, the amount of energy oozing from it made Gustav feel like absorbing it into his energy containers, but he had used God eyes to look around the whole place. The instant he messed with it, an alarm would be sent out, and he would fail the system's task. Interesting. This must be another type of energy fragment. Gustav only studied it for a few seconds more before moving towards the entry and exit point of the place. His looks at this point were not his original, neither was he dressed normally. He was dressed in a staff outfit, holding a keycard that gave him access in and out of the bank. Poor Ahmed. This one time you just have to be the scapegoat. So I can complete this task. Gustav said this internally with a tone of pity, but his face didn't display any pity. A few minutes later, Gustav was out of the place and back to his usual look. Daily task completed. 2/3, infiltrate a highly secure facility without arousing any suspicions. Mixed bloods at Gustav's level of strength couldn't even manage to pull all these kinds of stuff off, but Gustav had so many options in his arsenal, so doing this was no biggie as long as he implemented it well. He would be a very big menace to society if he decided to turn bad at the moment. Gustav proceeded to go complete the 3rd task. Daily task, 3/3, demonstrate your strength by stopping a vehicle moving at full force. What is the point of having me do this? Gustav said while rolling his eyes. It's fun to see how much your strength has improved. Besides, I don't set this. It's automated, the system voiced in his head with a light chuckle. Gustav nearly face-bombed as he walked across the street, not knowing how to go through with this one. Just as he arrived at a particular intersection, a loud whistling sound was heard across the air. Gustav turned to look up and noticed a projectile flying across the air. Before anyone could react, it slammed into the floating rail towards the southeast part of the sky, hundreds of feet above the ground. Boom! A massive explosion went off as parts of the rail fell towards the building below. Kyre! There were screams everywhere as parts of the building blasted across the place and fell towards the street. Chapter 5:37. It was a full-blown disaster as everyone in that vicinity ran for their dear lives. The sounds of wailing could be heard. It seemed like some people had been physically affected by this incident. Gustav didn't instantly sweep into action because of his current looks. He was still wearing the MBO uniform, so transforming into another face wasn't very sensible since they could check the database and find out that such a person wasn't a part of the MBO. He quickly proceeded to take out the fox mask from his storage bracelet and charged forward with immense speed. Phoom! A burst of wind blasted across the place as Gustav arrived in the midst of the chaos. The first thing he did was leap upwards as he spotted a massive rail line falling towards a group of people on the ground trying to get away. He grabbed it as he ascended above and landed on a rooftop in the distance before dropping it there. The instant Gustav finished doing these, he heard loud screams coming from above and below. He looked up and noticed that the floating rails above that now had a disconnected part had a train coming over from the other direction at full speed. The passengers, along with the engine man, were all screaming as they noticed the nearly 100-foot gap between both disconnected rails up ahead. Because that part was slightly sloppy heading downwards, it wasn't noticed earlier, so the train was only a few feet away by the time the engine man proceeded to try and stop the train. Gustav leaped away from the current building he was standing on and landed on the ground right below the disconnected rail. Size manipulation has been activated. Gustav started growing in size as the train arrived at the ledge. He stretched out his enlarging palms and caught the massive train as it fell. His body remained the same size, but his arms were almost as large as the building by the side. The people in the train had widened eyes as they stared at the massive palms grabbing hold of their train as all the coaches moved towards the side while falling. Grrrhhmm. Gustav groaned a little as he bore the force of the train and tightly grabbed hold of its body, causing parts of the window areas to blast into pieces. This injured some passengers within, causing Gustav to soften his grip a little. At this point, cracks had appeared on the ground all around Gustav as he held the train up for a few moments before he slowly started to bring down his massive arms. Gbbbbghm. The train made a loud sound of collision as Gustav allowed the last couch to make contact with the street first before releasing the rest. At this point, the entire street was baffled and filled with admiration as they wondered who Gustav was. He must be a prestigious MBO officer. This was the thought in most of their minds after witnessing this feat. However, they couldn't see Gustav's face due to his mask, neither could they recognize this stature. He was also wearing a black MBO uniform which indicated that he was at the lowest tier, and this didn't make sense to some of them because they believed someone as strong as this should be higher. Gustav deactivated size manipulation, causing his arm length to slowly retract back to normal as he completely let go of the train. Daily tasks completed. March 3rd, demonstrate your strength by stopping a vehicle moving at full speed. Gustav stared at the notification for a moment, scoffing internally. It was almost like the disaster that occurred was a convenient scenario for him to complete this task. He stared in the direction where the projectile that crashed into the rail came from, and noticed it was coming from the direction that led to Lineage City. How powerful must it be to pass through the dome? Gustav wondered, but then he remembered that going out of the city was easier than going in. He internally shook his head as he turned around and dashed away. Swoosh! The people in the vicinity didn't get the chance to thank him before he disappeared from the place. All they could recall him as was the masked fox officer. Gustav had to leave because he sensed the authorities approaching the area, including the officers stationed within the forest working on the operation with him. The authorities later arrived on the scene and helped out with the rest of the situation while questioning the survivors. Gustav headed towards a secluded part of the city and tapped on his left wrist again. Time to head back, he muttered while staring at the silver bracelet, which now had 3.5 blue bars. Gustav tapped a few more times and activated the bracelet, causing a bright white light to envelope him. Zing! He disappeared an instant later. They received an information about the number 1 best first-year cadet leaving camp on a mission. They were given the coordinates of where he'd be leaving from, and they made use of that information to send the war jet after him. A bald man dressed in MBO uniform said with a respectful attitude while standing in front of Miss Amy. I see. So where exactly did this information come from? Miss Amy asked. The source is anonymous. They have no idea where it came from. They just received the information and acted on it. They didn't think they'd be caught, he explained. And they wouldn't have been. If I didn't act, you lots would have screwed it up, Miss Amy chided mercilessly. A terrorist organization getting this kind of information gave Miss Amy the impression that someone within the MBO wanted Gustav gone. Such information could only have been leaked by an insider, but the good thing was, nobody had an idea about the mission Gustav was given. Neither did they know where he was headed. They only knew the pickup point where Gustav left from. Miss Amy had a look of relief as she recalled picking the pilot herself. The pilot did well in destroying the jet and protecting Gustav. Find out who this anonymous source is, Miss Amy instructed before walking away. She had several suspicions, so her plan was to make investigations on her side also. Chapter 538. She had several suspicions, so her plan was to make investigations on her side also. The officer had looks of fear and conflict on his face as he turned around to head back to the room where all the criminals that orchestrated the attack were placed. Gustav arrived back in his hotel room at this point and took off his mask. His bracelet had only 3 bars at this point, which indicated he could only engage in spatial travel about 6 more times before it ran out of power. At this time, it was late in the evening, and Gustav had been away for about 2 hours. He proceeded to move towards a device he placed on the side of the table and tapped on it. Earlier, when he was in the teleportation elevator, he had sneakily placed the tapping device somewhere on the last floor before he left. The tapping device was powerful enough to cover the whole floor, so Gustav didn't have to put it in their room directly. The only difference was when it was placed farther from the location that wanted to be observed, it was harder to get a clearer view and sound. This was why he placed it directly in the leadercon's office the other time to get a clearer outline and audio. He wasn't really worried this time because he only wanted to observe their activities and not really the sounds. Gustav rewinds the recording as he focuses on their side of the room to sort through what had gone down so far. All he noticed was both men freshening up to change outfits to use the pool in the balcony area. It really seemed like a vacation to them, and just as Gustav suspected, he was right. They truly wouldn't be doing anything besides waiting for Sahil to contact them in the next 2 days. Gustav fast-forwards to the present time back, where he could see a bunch of beautiful ladies in the room and around the pool dressed in swimsuits. About 9 ladies in total were present in the vicinity messing around with the 2 male officers. At the same time, they were being served by a lounge worker bringing them drinks and all sorts of exotic meals. The 2 men were really having the time of their lives pampered by these ladies while the war was going on in other regions, and people were getting killed by the minute. Gustav shook his head. The ones in high places are never involved when dangerous situations break out even though they happen to be the cause. Innocents are bound to always suffer for a cause they didn't start as long as they are at the bottom. Gustav could imagine himself being in this scenario if this was happening in Plankton City, and he never had an encounter with the system. Weakling will forever blame their unfortunate fate, and he didn't want to ever be in a situation like that, which was why power still remained his main goal. Especially when corrupt people who don't care about the lives of the innocent are at the top of the hierarchy. Gustav felt the urge to commit assassination on all top officials in this city. Still, with his current state of strength, this was impossible to achieve. He might be able to pull off 1 or 2, but there were forces on the side of the higher-ups who were stronger in hiding. Besides, this wasn't a part of the mission. He would literally be branded as wanted if he managed to pull any of the assassinations off, which would just be throwing all his hard work to waste. Gustav wasn't even trying to be a hero, but he found the acts of these people despicable and saw himself in the shoes of those trying to escape to keep their lives. Anyhow, he still wouldn't try and overdo anything or get involved in this crisis since it wasn't his battle to fight. Gustav kept watching the footage, and the whole messing around went on till nightfall, where both men sent all the girls away except for the 2 they really wanted to spend the night with. Gustav listened in a bit to the cracking sound of their conversations and pieced something together. One of them was attracted to the girl he asked to stay behind and still wanted her to come over the next morning after their night enjoyment had ended. Gustav had to shy away from the holographic display a few minutes later due to the graphic content playing out in front of him. This wasn't a scene that he was interested in witnessing. Wouldn't it be better for you to watch now and practice? That's a very experienced man giving you free teaching, and you are not taking opportunity of it. The system suddenly voiced in his head as Gustav lay on the bed. What the hell are you talking about? I'm not interested in seeing the body of a middle-aged man. That's homosexual, Gustav responded. Not if it's for research purposes. I tell you, You'll disappoint Angie in the future, cause you know nothing. The system chided with a burst of light laughter. No, I don't want to hear this, Gustav said as he took the pillow and covered both ears with it subconsciously. I live in you, the system reminded. Fuck you, Gustav said internally with a frustrated look. He didn't really use cuss words anymore, but the system always found a way to get it out of him. On a serious note, you need to get used to this because you never know what could happen when you're looking away, the system advised. Why are we still talking about this? Gustav asked. Are you getting dumber? I'm giving you a realistic theory here, the system pointed out. Sigh. All right, I get your point, but come on, you can't expect me to sit through and watch all that? Gustav said while seating up. If it was a murder pertaining to a case you were working on, you'd watch it without battling an eyelid, right? The system asked. Chapter 539. Yes. Gustav responded affirmatively. This is just the same thing. To be a professional, you have to get used to seeing anything and everything. This could really become something that might have a negative effect in the future if you keep running from it, the system explained. Gustav sighed once again and stood to his feet before moving towards the table where the projection was displayed. Gustav was glad the sound system wasn't very effective. His face showed immense discomfort as he watched the graphic was displayed. It seems things are getting intense. Around midnight, the base reached out again to get another daily report, which Gustav proceeded to cut out some information before explaining how he got to the current. The officers from the base were greatly shocked after hearing that Gustav already had a lead on Sahil and was planning how to meet up in 2 days. They had expected that it would take longer than this, but Gustav had once again surprised them. They came up with a good plan for Gustav to approach Sahil in the next 2 days. They had given Gustav information on the 2 men currently residing in the upper room where he was observing. Junior Commanders Folan and Dart were the henchmen of Commander Fabian. They still gave Gustav some more private information he needed to know about these 2. They had no idea that Gustav wasn't going to follow their plans since he already had his. His plans had a higher tendency of working out due to the hidden abilities that they didn't know he had. The communication ended sometime later after Officer Gooseman commended Gustav's progress. Gustav later moved out of his room after checking the footage and headed straight for the teleportation elevator. He arrived at the last floor a few moments later. He had already changed his looks before he left his room, taking the form of a suave-looking 62, handsome young man dressed in expensive clothing. After arriving on the corridor of the last floor, he noticed a beautiful young lady dressed in a tight red minigown heading towards the direction of the teleportation elevator. Gustav's next move was to head for her. "Excuse me, young miss, could I see you for a moment?" Gustav said with a smooth tone as he arrived in front of her. She paused her footsteps and stared at him up and down with a look of satisfaction. "Yes? How can I help you?" she asked with a smile. "Can you come with me? I just need a few moments of your time," Gustav said while winking at her and showing a charming smile. She returned the smile before responding. "I think I can spare a few moments. He must be really loaded. I guess today is my lucky day." Twice in a row, she bit her lip while thinking before following by Gustav's side. A few minutes later, both of them were in Gustav's room, sitting on his bed. Gustav's room was only 2 floors lower, so even though it wasn't up to the standard of the ones on the last floor, it was also very luxurious. He had hidden anything that could cause suspicions. The lady, who seemed to still be looking around, kept asking Gustav different questions. "Let's get down to business," Gustav finally spoke as he placed his hand on her face and turned it to face her. "You haven't, show." Before she could speak, she suddenly felt a prick on the side of her neck. Her eyes turned hazy, and the next thing she knew, she blacked out as her head fell limply towards the back. Gustav's left hand was currently pressing on a particular part of her neck area, which she didn't spot because she had no idea when Gustav's hand traveled towards her neck. She had already started passing out before she felt the prick. Gustav released her body completely, letting her fall onto the bed with her back. Shall be out for nothing less than 24 hours. That's enough time to get done what I need to do, Gustav said with a low tone as he searched her body for items. After taking all that was on her being, his face transformed into hers, and he moved towards the mirror area to check it out. There won't be any issues with this except for applying makeup, Unlike hers, Gustav's transformed face was without any makeup, causing him to look a little different. Still, he didn't see this a problem. Gustav saw the communication device in the lattice storage device, which was given to her by Junior Commander Dart, who was very interested in her and wanted her to come over again the next day. Yes, this lady happened to be one of them that visited the room of the two junior officers. Gustav had decided to mimic her identity and infiltrate their room when the day broke. All he needed to do now was work out his acting skills, use proper makeup, and dress sexily. This was the first time he would be trying to use the identity of a female, so he had to make sure it was fluid enough to avoid any form of suspicions. Hours later, the day broke, and Gustav put in all the necessary procedures before leaving their room around 11 a.m. Within a laboratory, Angie sat on an exalted medical stretcher in a thin medical fabric as rays of light scanned her entire body. A middle-aged-looking man with a few gray beards and a one-eye spectacle covering his left eye stood in front, observing the holographic monitor where her internal structure was displayed. Just what is this thing? He muttered with a contemplative look. I have cross-referenced its anatomy with every known parasite to exist, but it's like it doesn't exist. Yet it does, he added. Angie, who was laying down, heard him muttering some of these words and voiced out, What's wrong, Dr. Levi? This is quite a dilemma, Angie. You're going to have to give me a list of everything you came into contact with in the last 4 months, he voiced out in response. Chapter 540. This is quite a dilemma, Angie. You're going to have to give me a list of everything you came into contact with in the last 4 months, he voiced out in response. In the last 4 months? It's impossible for me to recall everything I came into contact with in the last 4 days. Talk more of 4 months, Angie responded with a look of indignation. True, that was unreasonable of me to ask for. Not everyone is blessed with superintelligence and retentive memory like me, he said with a look of contemplation. Is he really flexing right now? Angie said internally with a tired glare. The problem with this thing is, if I use my removal method, there's a chance that your legs might never be operational again since it has eaten deep into your leg's internal muscular build, Dr. Levi said while moving around with a disturbed look. They already missed it twice due to its ability to mimic the look of your cells. If you hadn't come to me directly for your third checkup, those screw-ups might never have found it, he added with a look of repression. Just as Dr. Levi had stated, Angie had already been here twice for checkups, but none of the scanners and monitors were able to notice anything wrong with her, so the doctors in charge of her checkups said nothing was wrong with her. They assumed it was just an allergic reaction to something she had eaten and would eventually stop. The painful attacks she had when waking up in the morning had been coming in more frequently lately, so she still came for checkups again. This time, she decided to meet Dr. Levi directly after remembering her last time here for bloodline strengthening with Gustav. This might also be a negative side effect to bloodline strengthening surgery you underwent months back. Although it's supposed to be 100% safe, complications are not completely unavoidable. Dr. Levi kept prancing around the place as he spoke. He turned around and moved close to the holographic monitor to study the weird parasite within Angie's body again. I'll need you to be coming every day for checkups until I find a way to deal with this, Dr. Levi said while typing a few things down. All right, Dr. Levi. Is there anything I should do in the meantime? Angie asked as she sat up. Just avoid using your speed too much. Use it moderately from now on, he instructed. My speed? But how would I train without that? Angie asked with a conflicted expression. You can, but use it moderately. Do not push yourself until I have found a way out of this predicament, Dr. Levi explained. It was quite a hard pill for Angie to swallow since she had decided to push herself to become very powerful before Gustav returned, but she had no choice but to nod in response as she stood to her feet. All right, she muttered with a defeated expression before leaving. Dr. Levi stood in the same spot for minutes, examining the reports from Angie's tests. This is really bad. If I don't find a way to get rid of this soon, she'll lose her bloodline. Dr. Levi mumbled underneath his breath with a worried look. The more she uses her speed, the more this thing saps away components from her bloodline. At the same time that was going on within camp, Gustav had already found himself in the room of the two junior commanders, Folan and Dart. He was currently dressed in a tight white dress, full-faced makeup with red cherry lips, long brown hair, exuding a seductive charisma. Of course, he had taken the form of the beautiful lady he called over to his room the other night who went by the name Cassandra. He was currently seated on the bed beside one of them. "Cassandra, you're looking sexier than even the night before," Junior Commander Dart stated as he trailed his finger up Gustav's right thigh. Gustav's trembled inwardly in disgust as he felt the fingers running up his thigh and subconsciously reached out to grab his hand. Now, Dart, you know I like having a little bit of fun before we go into the main deal," Gustav said with a seductive female tone as he gently caressed the hand and lifted it off his thighs. I totally enjoyed our fun yesterday. You're so much interesting than my boring wife," Junior Commander Dart responded with a sneaky-looking smile. Yes, I will make today even more fun," Gustav said while winking. He was glad he didn't lose composure and inwardly thanked his stars that he was able to stop those hands from going any further. "Looks like the universe wants you to get disvirgined one way or the other," the system suddenly voiced in his head with a burst of laughter. "Gustav, you little..." Gustav nearly cussed at the system again, but he calmed himself and breathed in. "What do you have in mind?" Junior Commander Dart asked. "You'll have to follow me to find out," Gustav said while standing up and walking sensually towards the door. Junior Commander Dart stared at the backside of the beautiful female in front of him, which vibrated with every movement, going up and down. He nearly whistled as he stood to his feet with a delighted expression. "Folan, they'll be back. I need to take care of something," he said while standing to his feet and following after Gustav. Have fun," Junior Commander Folan voiced out from across the room, where he was also busy with a beautiful and barely dressed lady. As they walked through the corridor, Junior Commander Dart caught up with Gustav and asked, "Where are we going?" "To my apartment. I have some fun tools we can use to make things even more interesting," Gustav responded. Images appeared in Commander Dart's mind, causing him to look forward to this even more as they moved towards Gustav's apartment. A few minutes later, they arrived there, and Junior Commander Folan sat on the bed as he waited for Gustav to bring out the tools he mentioned. Chapter 541. While he waited, he suddenly felt a surge of energy from behind him. He turned around only to see a milky glowing blade headed for him from behind. Shithainen, a weird-looking whitish force field-like energy, suddenly appeared around him, stopping the blade from penetrating for a few moments. "Who are you?" Just as he asked this question, he saw the arm holding onto the blade transform into a beastly muscular one, pushing the blade further in. Poochie, it stabbed through his chest in the next instant, as his face shone confusion and disbelief. How? The force field should be powerful enough to stop the attack of a falcon ranked. Unless? His eyes widened even more as he coughed out blood and fell to the back. The force field disappeared completely along with Gustav's atomic blade, which disintegrated into light particles within Junior Commander Dart's chest. Gustav slowly moved towards him on the floor while slowly shapeshifting back into the look he used upon entering the city. The commander was not dead yet. His eyes were still wide open as he stared at Gustav's transformation with utter shock and regret. A shapeshifter? They still exist? This was the last thought that appeared in his mind before another milky-colored blade came stabbing down to the left side of his chest. Poochie, his vision slowly faded as he coughed out another mouthful of blood. Gustav pulled the atomic disintegration blade out of him and turned around to go change out of his current clothes. He was still dressed in the tight white gown and couldn't hide how disgusted he felt at the moment. After changing back into a male's outfit, he moved towards the corner where he stabbed Junior Commander Dart. He had already breathed his last at this point and was covered in a pool of his own blood with wide-open eyes. "You're not the worst of them. You probably would have survived, but you were just unfortunate." Gustav didn't have any shred of pity in the tone of his voice as he squatted. He slowly took off the commander's clothes and moved them to the bathroom to get them washed. They'll have to find a way to mend these holes. This was the only problem at the moment since he had torn holes through the clothes when he stabbed Junior Commander Dart twice. After thinking about it for a few moments, Gustav decided not to stress about it. It might even be better this way. It would be more believable if I mentioned to Folan that I had rough sex with this girl which led to the clothes turning out this way. Gustav thought. Except you've never had sex. Talk more of having it rough. The system voiced. Shut it, Gustav responded before moving out of the bathroom. He walked towards Junior Commander Dart's body and carried it towards the bathroom as well before dropping him in front of the bathtub. Looks like it's time to finally test out this disintegration ability, Gustav said internally as he placed his palms together while staring at the empty bathtub in front. He closed his eyes for a few seconds before suddenly opening them again. A milky glow appeared in his eyes and his palms as he slowly separated them and stretched them towards the bathtub. Pool of disintegration has been activated. Estimated time, 1 hour, 1000 EP. The bathtub suddenly started getting filled up with this milky-colored energy, reaching the top in a matter of moments. Gustav's eyes returned back to normal after this, and he stared at the tub that had been filled with milky energy. He squatted and grabbed onto Junior Commander Dart's corpse before lifting it and throwing it into the tub. A sizzling sound rang out next as the body landed in the pool of milky energy as the smell of flesh being cooked drifted across the bathroom. Gustav turned around at this point and headed back to the main room. He arrived where the pool of blood was positioned and proceeded to snap his fingers, causing sprinkles of milky-colored light to fall onto the floor. Everywhere this light touched, the blood disintegrated into light particles. In a few moments, not even a single speck of blood could be seen on the floor. The floor was unaffected due to the lights disappearing before they made contact with it. They only made contact with the blood. Gustav proceeded to lay on his bed and sighed in relief as he closed his eyes. In the next 1 hour, he moved towards the bathroom area to check on the bathtub. The milky-colored pool had disappeared, along with the body of Junior Commander Dart. There was not even a single trace left. Nothing to be seen at all. Looks like my calculations were right. It would take about that long to disintegrate the body of a mixed blood of that strength completely, Gustav thought before proceeding to take the clothes of the commander out of the washing machine as well. He proceeded to dress in shorts and a shirt in a few moments before moving towards the mirror area. His face and body slowly transformed as he stared at the mirror. In a few moments, his entire body features had become exactly like that of Commander Dart, with no difference to be spotted. The small beards and potbelly were also visible, along with the pair of sharp and mean eyes. Gustav went on to a part of his room that branched off into another. This was where he had kept the lady, Cassandra. He reached out to her unconscious body and brought her back to his main room to clothe her and return all her things back to her possession. A few minutes later, he placed her to lay on the bed before leaving through the door. She'll find her way out when she comes to, Gustav thought as he headed towards the teleportation elevator. Now it's time to play Dart, Gustav said internally as he headed towards the last floor. Chapter 542. Now, it's time to play Dart, Gustav said internally as he headed towards the last floor. Gustav moved towards the room Junior Commanders Dart and Folan were residing in and brought out the keycard before accessing the room. At this time, Junior Commander Folan II had just finished having fun with the lady that was with him when Dart left the other time. The lady was just leaving as Gustav arrived. Junior Commander Folan displayed a huge grin on his face as he nodded at Gustav. Gustav returned the grin as Junior Commander Dart would. How did yours go? Junior Commander Folan asked from up ahead. As you can see, it was intense, Gustav said with a wider grin while gesturing at the holes on his shirt. Oh, you? It seems she handled you pretty well, Junior Commander Folan responded with an understanding look. Ah, she did. I was able to do it in ways I couldn't do it with my wife, Gustav added while proceeding towards the sofa by the side to sit. Cheers, man, Junior Commander Folan responded while handing Gustav a drink. Gustav responded by receiving it and taking a sip before asking, what about you? This one is not quite bad too. Both of them began to share experiences as Junior Commander Folan narrated most of the time. They ended up discussing for the next 2 hours. From this, Gustav understood more about the character he was pretending to be as well as Junior Commander Folan too. Later during the day, Junior Commander Folan received a call from the region base and had to leave to get some things sorted out personally. Gustav was happy to stay behind and let him go handle what he wanted to because he planned to look around the place anyways. After Junior Commander, He moved towards the small diamond-shaped pinky object placed on the table in front. Gustav could tell that this was a spatial storage device by sensing the energy waves coming from it. It was similar to the button underneath his collar, which happened to be his storage device, but this one seemed to be more sophisticated and secure. It definitely wouldn't open up if the owner wasn't the one in its possession. Those who were professional storage devices hackers would not be able to open this one without causing the spatial store in it to collapse, damaging all the items within. Gustav grabbed hold of it to inspect, and to his surprise, he instantly gained access to the things within as a holographic panel appeared in front of him. "Looks like Dart is the one with access to this," Gustav muttered as he checked the holographic table in front of him, which displayed everything within. Wow, Dart was loaded. Gustav couldn't help but exclaim as he noticed the expensive-looking jewelry being displayed. The storage space within this device was as big as an entire living room in a luxurious household, which was 3 times the size of Gustav's. Gustav's storage device was nearly filled up due to the things he always brought along with him, but it wasn't even close to all the things kept within this one. Diamond-shaped objects, gold bars, and some other mineral resources stacked together would rival even the most secure storage vaults of banks where their most valuable items were stored. No officer is supposed to be this rich. Gustav was dumbfounded, but after piecing things together, he wasn't so shocked. The whole civil war started with these groups in power, disagreeing over the authority of the world government. The misuse of resources and the economical state of the city wasn't so good as well since the world government started to increase its authority in the city. These groups on the side of the world government were trying to push the other groups out of power, which was what started the civil war. A whole lot of natives from the city were on the side of the other groups who were trying to stop the world government authority from expanding within the city, but this was proving difficult due to the groups on their side. It just so happened that the Zalabans were amongst those supporting the world government, and now seeing what Dart had in his storage device gave Gustav a stronger grasp of the situation. What's that? Gustav wondered out loud as he noticed a part of the storage device where a document was kept. Seeing as this slot only contained this document, as well as a small shiny mineral placed beside it, Gustav's curiosity was piqued. He proceeded to pull this one out of the storage device. Zing, a flash of blue light appeared, and within it was the documents and the weird-looking stone. Gustav decided to check out the documents first, and his face lit up with a look of interest as he read through the contents. So this is what they plan to offer Sahil. Gustav muttered as he scanned through them. Isn't this a bit too much? Maybe they're planning to backstab him later in the future after this whole thing is blown over. Gustav kept speaking as he flipped through the pages. Oh, according to this they can't. Looks like this is legit. Gustav mumbled after arriving at the last page and dropped the documents. He proceeded to grab hold of the stone. This stone happens to be among the items offered, he muttered while inspecting it. Gustav couldn't find anything out of the ordinary with the weird grayish-colored stone, but decided to make use of God Eyes to see through it. God Eyes has been activated. His pupils turned green and crimson with gold on the outer covering as the world around him also transformed, becoming see-through. Gustav had a look of confusion as he stared at the stone. He couldn't see through it. He strengthened his gaze and stared at it even more intensely than before. However, besides a weird, foggy-looking green smoke oozing from it, he couldn't see anything else. Chapter 543. He could only see this weird, foggy-looking thing when staring at the stone using God Eyes, but he couldn't see it after deactivation. Gustav deactivated God Eyes for the 3rd time, after not still being able to see through the stone, and placed it back on the table. Do you know what this thing is? He asked the system internally. Scanning components now. The system responded as bright reddish rays of light shot out of Gustav's pupils. After a few seconds, the rays of light shooting out of Gustav's eyes formed a holographic projection that started computing information on this stone. Void Stone? Gustav saw the name appear along with several images of this stone, taken in different places worldwide. One of the rarest materials in the world necessary for building the most powerful technological devices in the world. Gustav kept reading the list information internally. So rare that it had been deemed illegal for sale by the world government, so other organizations are not able to lay hold of it besides those under the world government. If found in any part of the world by mistake, one is expected to report to the nearby authorities for them to have it taken away. Could lead to a life sentence if found in possession of blah blah blah. I want to know what exactly this does. Gustav decided to skip most of the information that emphasized how rare this material was. Supposedly one of the most important materials responsible for the creation of the item given by the Slarkovs to the human race thousands of years back as a gift. This was the last thing Gustav read at the end of the list of information. There was still no detailed explanation of what exactly this stone did or how to use it, which made Gustav feel baffled. But at least now he understood that this was a precious item that couldn't even be purchased with money. Recalling that Sahil was not just an advanced arms dealer, but also a technologist working under someone. They both shared a history of crime, so Gustav understood this was likely an item they would want to lay their hands on, but are unable to due to the whole situation regarding the Void Stone. Now that they would hand over something that not even money could help them lay hold of, Sahil would definitely agree to their demands. Gustav felt this whole situation might lead to something bigger and worse in the future if Sahil managed to lay his hands on this. On the bright side, he could get close to Sahil and place the tracking device on him now using Junior Commander Dart's identity. This would be mission success for him, but from the information he had gotten on Sahil, who happened to be a master in the art of escaping, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't notice the tracker before leaving this place. So even if it ended up being a successful mission, all his work might end up going to waste at this point. If Sahil got all this and still managed to escape after everything, who knew what he would build next? It might even rival the most dangerous weapons or devices currently in the world government possession. At this point, Gustav made the decision. "I'll catch him myself," he muttered underneath his breath with a strong gaze. Seems like a plausible decision, but you have to be extremely careful. What do you have in mind? The system supported Gustav's decision, but wanted to ensure he came up with a good plan to manage this. It won't be immediate since people from both sides will be around. Everyone will be on guard during the meetup. They'll still have to place the tracker on him first, Gustav said internally with a contemplative expression. How do you intend to place the tracker on him? The system asked. I'm the one with the documents and the stone, which means he'll also be the one handing it over, Gustav responded with a smirk. Hours later, Gustav was laying on Commander Dart's bed, pretending to be asleep while Junior Commander Fabian was on the other king-size bed by the side. Junior Commander Fabian arrived about an hour earlier. He brought Gustav to speed on the things that had gone down so far, and the reports they were getting from outside Region 32. Both sides had received a lot of casualties, but according to Junior Commander Fabian, their side happened to have inflicted more damage, and the higher-ups were starting to plan an operation to eliminate the higher-ups of the other side. Lucius was mentioned to have gone missing on an assignment. Still, the way Junior Commander Fabian mentioned him, he was discarding any kind of insinuation that Lucius was in trouble. According to him, there was no way anyone would be able to handle Lucius, so he was probably deep in the enemy base sabotaging them at the moment. If only he knew that Lucius had already been sent to the afterlife by Gustav. Gustav had already finished making plans for catching Sahil, but at the moment, he wanted to regain his energy since keeping shapeshifting activated for a long period burned a lot of bloodline energy. He was currently hiding under the duvet after shapeshifting back to his original look while pretending to be asleep. Junior Commander Folan still wanted to have fun this night, so he invited some girls over. They were all chilling at the pool area so as not to disturb Gustav in the room. There was still another day to go before Sahil reached out to them with the location. Just like that, another night went by, and today was the 6th day of Gustav getting to the city. Back in camp, it had already been a week since he left. Unbeknownst to him, the others were already missing his presence and would occasionally glance at his door area whenever they passed. This included even Indrik, who would get all sentimental the moment he passed by. I hope we can form a bond one day like we had when I was very little. This thought appeared in Indrik's mind as he passed by Gustav's door again. However, he suddenly recalled something. How do I deal with Angie's situation? Chapter 544. However, he suddenly recalled something. How do I deal with Angie's situation? He remembered injecting something given to him, sent to him by young Joe and to Angie when he met her in a secluded environment. Angie felt the prick, but she thought it was an attack due to the syringe not being visible. He had no idea what the contents of the syringe were, but he knew it was nothing good, and since he was after dealing with Gustav at that time, he didn't care if she would be harmed. Now it was an entirely different case, and he didn't know if she was okay or not. So far, he didn't see any traces or signs that something was wrong with her. Indrik didn't want this to be another reason for him and Gustav to battle again, so he decided he would look into it. He couldn't just go back to contacting young Joe because he had said everything he knew about the whole past scenario and pointed out those he could. Right now, he had no means of contacting young Joe, and even if he did, he wouldn't want to because this just opened him up for another round of manipulation. He walked away after deciding to watch over her for any signs and ask her later if anything was up with her. So far, even though they weren't really on speaking terms, they were no longer hostile to each other as well. Within Region 32 in Lineage City, Gustav spent the entire day moving around with Junior Commander Folan. They had to check out different parts of the region for any possible spy movements to ensure no plans to sabotage them or anything the next day. This region was being controlled by two groups, but there was the possibility of infiltration from the enemy groups with the intention of causing sabotage. All in all, they were just being cautious. Gustav used this to mark out several spots and make escape routes in his mind if anything went wrong in his personal plans. They later returned back to their room in El Caso's place. They moved to the pub area to get some drinks with the regional leader, who happened to be accompanying them. They talked and had fun for the rest of the evening. Region leader Khan asked to see what the offer to Sahil entails. Still, Junior Commander Folan had to shut him down there, saying it wasn't to be disclosed in public places. They would have to wait till the next morning to contact them with the location for them to meet. It was only at the defining moment that he would find out. Region leader Khan saw both junior commanders exchange glances and understood. Late at night, both of them returned to their room while Region leader Khan left, saying he had some personal issues to attend to. Gustav could hear during his communication with someone using a communication tool that they were looking for a missing person. His mind flashed to a particular person when he heard this part of the conversation, but he wasn't really bothered. It would still take some time before anyone could catch on to anything that had happened relating to his manslaughter on the first day he arrived here. The night went by just like that, and another day arrived. The day before, Gustav had to excuse himself for about 2 hours to complete his daily tasks. He was lucky June, or Commander Folan, didn't suspect anything except for the fact that he had been sleeping without snoring recently, which he made fun of. Gustav was hoping he would get the chance to take care of his daily tasks today. This would only be possible if everything went as planned. Around 6 a.m. in the morning, their communication device rang, and Junior Commander Folan proceeded to answer it. As expected, it was from Sahil, who proceeded to give them a location to meet within 10 minutes. He mentioned that if they were even a second late, he would be gone. The skies were still dark at this time, but Gustav and Junior Commander Folan had been expecting this, so they had been awake for a long time. Junction 23rd, the main center, Junior Commander Folan spoke through the communication device to Region Leader Khan. Region Leader Khan gathered a group of 5 to meet with both of them at the location mentioned. Gustav and Junior Commander Folan quickly moved towards the location mentioned that happened to be located somewhere around the edge of Region 32. A ride was already waiting for them outside, so it took no more than 6 minutes to arrive there, leaving them with about 4 more minutes left. They arrived at a 5-story structure that looked like a medical facility. Sahil contacted them again upon their arrival and directed them on where to head to. Region Leader Khan and 4 Taliban officers dressed in full black followed them from behind as they moved around the place, going from corridors to corridors. They arrived at a particular place that led to a dead end where only a wall could be seen. "There's nothing here," Junior Commander Folan voiced towards the communication device. "Keep going," Sahil responded from the other end. The workers in the vicinity even told them this place led to a dead end, but they had to follow Sahil's instructions. "I sense a spatial and gravitational energy," Gustav voiced out as they approached the wall. "I don't sense anything." Junior Commander Folan had a look of confusion on his face, just as they were only 6 feet away from the wall. Zing, everyone got teleported away. Gustav only saw everywhere turn white for an instant, And the next thing they knew, they were in the underground section of a party-ruined building. Only the holes above and on the walls provided a source of light. The vicinity looked quite dead, and up ahead, a man wearing shades with a scarf covering his face could be seen standing in place. Chapter 545. Behind him was a group of 7 dressed in red jackets, all armed with dangerous-looking weapons. Dash, where are we? Dash, what's going on? The guards following them turned around to touch the wall and realized they couldn't go back. Welcome, my friends, he voiced out as the outline of a smile could be seen on the scarf covering his face. Slick SL, good to finally meet you. Junior Commander Folan voiced out along with Gustav, who also retained his composed form and greeted as well. They all shook hands with him, Region Leader Khan included. Zing, 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 several chairs and a table appeared in their front, and Sahil gestured at them to take a seat. Sahil sat about 10 feet away, leaving sufficient distance between himself and the Zalabans, but a table was positioned in their midst. Where is this that you have brought us to? Region Leader Khan asked with an intrigued look. That's not important. Let's get down to business first. Getting back to the region won't be a problem if you lots didn't set any traps for me, Sahil responded still with a smile. Gustav and Junior Commander Folan stared at each other for a moment before nodding. Gustav proceeded to bring out the diamond-like storage device that belonged to Junior Commander Dart. He sorted through the belongings and brought out the documents first before standing to his feet. The men behind pointed their weapons at him, causing him to pause his movements. One of them moved forward and took the documents from Gustav's grasp before handing them over to Sahil themselves after opening it and scanning through its contents. Sahil nodded in satisfaction as he received the documents and started flipping through the pages one after the other. He slowly read through the contents, and even though it was hard to read his expressions due to his face being covered with a scarf, Gustav could see the excitement in his eyes. After a few more minutes, he finished flipping through the pages completely and raised his head to stare at them. Is this true? He inquired with an excited tone. Every word written, as you can see, is backed up with signatures from the higher-ups, Junior Commander Folan responded. Wonderful. Where is the item? He asked again. Gustav raised his hand to show the void stone, which was on his palm. Before any of the men behind could move forward, Sahil stood to his feet and moved towards Gustav to grab the stone himself. The instant he grabbed the stone from Gustav's hand, an invisible spider positioned on the top of the stone instantly burrowed into his hand unbeknownst to him. He didn't feel anything as this unknown thing invaded his body. He inspected the stone with a delighted expression while moving back to his seating area. Gustav smirked internally, tracking device successfully planted. Sahil was still looking excited as he brought a device out of the blue and scanned the stone. The outline of a grand smile appeared on his face underneath the scarf as he voiced out, "It's genuine." The void stone. Did he just say the void stone? Region Leader Khan was shocked as he stared at the grayish-colored stone in Sahil's grasp. The others behind were just as surprised seeing Sahil being given this unpurchasable item. Of course it is Slick SL. Now, do you accept our offer? Junior Commander Folan said with a smile. Definitely, I agree with this, Sahil responded as he grabbed hold of the documents again. Back at the base in Ruhuggi City, a beeping sound could be heard within the main tent as all 4 officers gathered around the main monitor. Oh my goodness. The young lad did it, Officer Gooseman said with a surprised look. He managed to place the tracking device on Sahil? It has only been 6 days. Officer Millie Brown voiced out with a tone of disbelief. Officer Tron and Lewis also stood by the side with looks of surprise, as well seeing the tracking device go online. But didn't he say he was in Region 32? How does the tracking device show Region 27? Officer Millie asked. Yeah, he did say that. Maybe he changed locations, Officer Lewis responded. He still hasn't reported in, and it's been 2 days. This is probably why, Officer Tron added. The most important part is he has completed the mission. With such speed too, magnificent, Officer Gooseman said with a delighted tone. They now realized that they had truly looked down on Gustav, and he wasn't like the other cadets. The next step now is withdrawal. We will need to contact him for that, Officer Gooseman added. Back in the underground structure, both parties were still conversing on a few things. If I had found any secret hidden communication device on any of you, I would have assumed this was a ploy, but now I don't have any worries, Sahil stated as he stood to his feet. Inwardly, Gustav thanked his stars that he left the communication device he had been using to contact the base back in his room. When they got here, Sahil had already scanned everyone using one of his advanced technology devices. If anyone had a hidden communication device that was functioning at that moment, he would be alerted. The communication device Gustav used to communicate the base was always functional. Now that everything seems legit, I can transfer this to my boss, Sahil voiced out as he turned around and moved backward. His words caused their faces to lit up with confusion as they stared at Sahil's actions. To their surprise, he approached the person standing in the midst of these 7 people dressed in a red jacket and knelt. Just like the others, he was also holding a weapon and wearing a mask. He didn't seem any different from a mere lackey, yet Sahil was kneeling in front of him. While they were staring with confused looks, this person removed the mask covering his face, and the looks that were revealed underneath were that of Sahil. "Good job," this man said before collecting the documents from the one kneeling. The one kneeling stood to his feet and also took off the scarf wrapped around his face, revealing a slightly different look. Chapter 546. Good job, this man said before collecting the documents from the one kneeling. The one kneeling stood to his feet and took off the scarf wrapped around his face, revealing a slightly different look. Both of them looked quite similar, but the one that had been speaking to them all this time with a scarf covering his face had a 3-inch scar on his chin area. The moment the Zalabans noticed the two, they were instantly able to tell that the one they had been negotiating with all this time wasn't the real Sahil. The real Sahil had been standing behind all this while pretending to be a lackey, while this lookalike handled everything so far. "What is going on here, Slick SL?" Junior Commander Folan voiced out from behind with a confused expression, just like everyone. "My friends, I apologize for the confusion." The Sahil dressed in red jacket handed the weapon in his grasp over to his lackey and started walking forward. "This man here is Jabal, my lookalike," he said while pointing at the fake Sahil. He approached the chair and took a seat in front before crossing his leg with a smile of satisfaction etched on his face as he noticed their expressions. "You see, I take a lot of precautions to keep myself secure. My lookalike handled everything so far to prevent any form of trap or ploy that may have been aimed at me. Jabal is my insurance. He is trained and ready to die in my place just in case any hazardous ploy had been orchestrated. I apologize once again for the lack of trust, but I've been in this business for many years. It's hard to trust anyone, even my business partners," the real Sahil said with a half-apologetic and half-prideful gaze. "It's all right, we completely understand. Now that you can see that no trap was set, will you sign the documents?" Junior Commander Folan went straight back to business after understanding the situation. Although he and the others felt this was way too much precaution taken, it was understandable when they tried putting themselves in his shoes. "Yes, I will sign them now. I will not say, 'This is not a deal,' even if I am drunk," Sahil responded with a peal of light laughter before he started sorting through the documents. Only Gustav knew just how smart this whole setup Sahil planned was. "The tracker is in the wrong person," Gustav voiced inwardly. He now understood what they meant by saying Sahil was very slippery to catch. They were all fooled from the start, thinking they were negotiating with the real Sahil. It had been set up so well. The voice and the facial description all matched the images, so no one could tell that it wasn't him, even though he was using a scarf to cover part of his face. The problem now was, the lookalike would not always move with Sahil. According to what Gustav had read about Sahil, he mostly moved alone except when he was delivering merchandise or needed protection for negotiations like this. His travels from place to place were always alone, along with his hideout. He was always by himself, and even his subordinates could not tell his location. This was all backed up by facts because the MBO had caught a lot of his subordinates who wouldn't be able to tell of his location even though they were directly working under him. The moment this negotiation was over, Sahil would obviously disappear again by himself, while this lookalike would most likely be sent to another location. Back at the base, they already saw this as a completed mission, not knowing that they'd be going after the wrong person. "Here you go," Sahil raised the documents after signing them, and one of his henchmen moved over to pass it to Junior Commander Folan. Junior Commander Folan sat in place and scanned through the documents and, after a while, nodded. With this we have a successful negotiation, Junior Commander Folan voiced out with a smile and stood to his feet. Gustav also stood to his feet at this point with Region Leader Khan, and they moved closer to him. May our partnership last long. With this, you don't have to worry about the other side receiving any merchandise from me. The Zalabans will be responsible for winning the war, Sahil said as he proceeded to shake Junior Commander Folan. Gustav also moved forward and shook his hand as well, retaining his normal composure with a smile. He stared into Sahil's eyes for a moment. They'll have to use it, Gustav said inwardly as he ended the handshake. You have to be careful. It would be suspicious if anyone saw you, the system warned internally. I don't have a choice here. This is the only way, he responded while moving towards the side. Just make sure to look around you properly. No one must see you using it, the system voiced internally. Region Leader Khan also shook hands with Sahil as well, and both sides prepared to leave. To show my enthusiasm, Daryl, Sahil called out to one of his henchmen and held out his hand. The henchman moved forward with a blue ring in his grasp and placed it on Sahil's palm. Sahil tapped the ring, which emitted a projection displaying stacks of boxes where weapons and other different kinds of technological materials were kept. This is enough advance supply for 100 troops. I'm giving this for free, Sahil said before handing the ring over to Junior Commander Folan, who then handed it to Gustav. Junior Commander Dart was always the one handling things like this, so it was normal he gave it to him. Gustav wore the ring on his finger to ensure its safety as they thanked Sahil for his generosity. This was a great meeting. Whenever you need items, you can just consult Jabal over here like you've been doing before. Everything will be sorted out by him, Sahil stated. Junior Commander Folan nodded in understanding before asking, How do we leave? He looked around, not seeing any exit. The same way you came. The gateway is activated now, Sahil said before turning around. Chapter 547. I have to go deal with something too, he added while turning around to head towards where his henchmen were stationed. Meanwhile, the Zalabans turned around to leave, moving towards the wall area where they had appeared on their arrival here. While Gustav was moving forward along with them, he positioned himself at the very edge and looked down. God Eyes has been activated. His eyes turned scarlet and green with a hint of gold surrounding the irises. Gustav suddenly turned his head to the side to stare backward. His sight zoomed in on Sahil, who was walking away with his back facing them. Life signs identification is operational. His sight zoomed in on his head area with speed seeing through it and spotting a shape on his forehead area. Saving life sign, life sigh, has been saved successfully. The instant this notification appeared in his line of sight, Gustav closed his eyes instantly and turned to look forward. All this was done in 3 seconds. God Eyes has been deactivated. Upon opening his eyes, they had returned to normal. Just as they reached the wall area, a loud shout was heard from behind. Hold it! This voice was similar to that of Sahil. Still, Gustav could instantly tell that it was the lookalike, Jabal, even though there was only a slight difference. The Zalabans paused their steps and turned around with looks of confusion. What is it? Region Leader Khan questioned. What did you do? He asked while moving forward. Sahil was also alerted at this point and turned around to see what was happening behind him. What are you talking about? Junior Commander Folan asked. I saw you look backwards a while back with red eyes, and now your eyes have returned to normal. I sensed a weird energy from that direction, which was why I was able to spot you just before you closed your eyes and looked forward, Jabal voiced out. Gustav was frozen internally as he heard that. How did he sense the power of God Eyes? Even though he was startled, he still retained his composure. Red eyes? No one has an ability that triggers residential eyes in our midst. Region Leader Khan, do you? Junior Commander Folan voiced out. No, I don't. There must be a misunderstanding, Region Leader Khan responded. I saw him. If he didn't do anything, why did he look back? And why did I sense that weird energy? Jabal stated while pointing in Gustav's direction. There must be some sort of mistake, haha. Junior Commander Dart doesn't have such abilities, Junior Commander Folan laughed lightly while staring at Gustav at the side. Hold on. Jabal never lies. He doesn't have a reason to, since he'll soon be dead one of these days anyways. He's the sixth of his kind already, Sahil said while walking forward. Also, he is keen to sensing energy no matter how hidden. So long as an energy emitted, it's like a beacon to him. This is also one of the ways he's able to protect himself from danger. Sahil arrived a few feet in front of the Zalabans after saying this and stared at Gustav. If I did something, there should be some kind of proof then. I don't see anyone getting blown up or dying from anything. Gustav finally spoke. Then why did your eyes emit such weird energy? And why does your partner not believe you have an ability that triggers your eye color to change? Jabal asked in quick succession as the suspicious look on his face increased. Knowing that Sahil trusted his lookalike very much and everything he stated so far seemed logical, he figured he had to choose his next words wisely. He couldn't lie about his eyes changing color. My partner does not know if it because it's a new ability that I obtained recently and I was just testing it out. Gustav spoke with a straight face void of any distress. You gained a new ability? Junior Commander Folan couldn't hide his surprise as he voiced out. H&M? Gustav nodded at Folan, not knowing that at this point, Folan had started to question this whole scenario. And why do you feel the need to test it out on my subordinates? You gazed in our direction with this, if I'm correct? Sahil questioned with a suspicious look as well. I can use it to determine power levels. I was curious to see what the power levels of your subordinates were, Gustav said as he activated God Eyes one more time, causing his eye color to change. Everyone was able to see his eyes clearly at this point. If I had done anything harmful, I'm sure it would be taking effect by now. Is anyone feeling strange? Gustav stated while donning a look of ridicule. When did eye color change become a thing of alarm? Gustav added, faking an expression of annoyance. This is highly disrespectful towards my partner. We just concluded a successful negotiation, Mr. Slick. Don't let your unfound insecurities ruin our present relationship. Junior Commander Folan spoke up as well after deciding he would question Gustav about the ability later. Region Leader Khan nodded in support as well. While I do apologize for this, I take everything seriously, my friends. It is why I have managed to stay alive for this long, Sahil said with an apologetic look before turning to stare at Gustav again. Do you mind identifying the bloodline rank of every one of my subordinates? He questioned. Junior Commander, Folan and Region Leader Khan were about to speak again, but Gustav raised his hand to stop them. I have no issues with that so long as after this you throw no further suspicions at me, Gustav stated while Sahil nodded in response. Gustav went ahead to mention the bloodline rank of all 7 people in a red jacket and even included the power level of Jabal as well. Sahil nodded with a smile on his face. Well done. You have mentioned all this correctly. The Zalabans had looks of relief as they heard this. Junior Commander Folan was about to say something, but Sahil cut him short. Just one more thing, Sahil stated while bringing out a triangular piece of equipment. Chapter 548. Just one more thing, Sahil stated while bringing out a triangular piece of equipment. What are you playing at again, Mr. Slick? You have to stop this if you don't want to ruin our newfound relationship, Junior Commander Folan voiced out once again with a tone of annoyance. Relax, my friend. Don't worry, this is just a device for examining my crew, Sahil explained before turning around and started heading towards the gang of 6 behind. I just need you all to hold on for a few seconds. Don't worry, I am no longer asking any questions or pointing fingers, Sahil added before arriving in front of the 7. The group from the Zalabans stared at Sahil's actions with confused looks. Gustav was suddenly feeling a sense of crisis as he stood in place. We just agreed that there will be no more suspicions after the previous question. We should be taking our leave now, Gustav voiced out. You're right, Junior Commander Dart, but how about we just give him a few seconds to complete his examination? Region Leader Khan stated. Him examining his crew doesn't affect us in any way, so we can tolerate this, Junior Commander Folan added as well, deciding to just watch. Gustav had no choice but to keep quiet at this point, so as not to arouse any more suspicions. Sahil tapped the weird triangular device in his hand, and it shot out some blue rays that scanned all 6 of them at once. Their bodies were shone with translucent light, displaying their internal structure as well. The device kept making weird scanning noises for a few seconds before showing a green light. Sahil nodded at this and turned around with a smile before moving back towards the position of the Zalabans. I apologize for the inconveniences, my friends. I am finished with examining the state of my crew bodies, he voiced out as he arrived in front of them. Just as Junior Commander Folan was about to respond to that, Jabal interrupted. Boss, you haven't checked me, he said respectfully. Oh yes, that's true, Sahil said before turning to face him with a light chuckle. One moment, he said to Junior Commander Folan before tapping the device again. It shot out the same rays as before scanning Jabal. At this point, the crisis Gustav felt in his mind was pushed to a whole new level. What exactly does that device do? Gustav asked the system internally, hoping it wasn't what he thought it was. How strong is the camouflaging power of the tracker? The system responded with a question of her own. One of the most powerful in the world. It hides within the blood vessels and mimics that part of the body, Gustav responded. If that is the case, there should be no problems unless this device has the Ulti Stone as part of its build, the system stated. What's the Ulti Stone? Just as Gustav was asking this, the device finished scanning as well. Beep, 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 beep. Beeping sounds suddenly started to reverberate across the place. Everyone stared at the device, and then at Jabal, whose body was still shining a translucent light. His left wrist area had a red light position in a part of it. Tracking device spotted. The voice of an AI rang out at this point, causing everyone's eyes to widen with shock. Gustav began to circulate his bloodline as this voice rang out. Shit. How does this guy have everything? The six behind instantly raised their weapons and pointed them towards the Zalabans. So this was your plan? You lots wanted to track my movement? Sahil voiced out as he turned to face Gustav specifically. The Zalabans' troops behind also pointed their weapons forward at Sahil's crew, ready to exchange fire as well. We know nothing about this. You can't just assume that we're responsible, Junior Commander Folan voiced out. He is responsible. He is the only one who Sahil made physical contact with from the beginning. Is this something the Zalabans planned together, or is it a solo act? Sahil questioned. As Junior Commander Folan heard this, different thoughts suddenly started appearing in his mind as he turned to the side to stare at Gustav. Red eyes, no snoring for the past 2 days. No having fun with any girls like we planned before except for our first day of arrival. Completely sleeping underneath the duvet without messing up the covers before the next morning, without pulling face from underneath during the entire night. Junior Commander Folan's eyes widened as he analyzed all this and stared at Gustav. Who are you? He voiced out. At this point, everyone knew there was something up with Gustav as Junior Commander Folan voiced that out. Now, let's all calm down. There is no proof that this was done by me, Gustav spoke, still trying to salvage the situation. He definitely planted it. Jabal voiced out as everyone began to surround Gustav. I don't think this man is a part of us, Mr. Slick. I promise the Zalabans is not behind this. I just realized the numerous ways in which he's different from my partner, Junior Commander Folan stated as he began to channel his bloodline. My trust in you lots have completely dwindled. Take him down, Sahil commanded, causing everyone to start firing at Gustav. Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, Gustav knew there was no salvaging the situation. Sprint has been activated. Every single beam and projectile being shot towards him suddenly slowed down as he turned to the side to face Sahil's direction. If I can grab onto him, Gustav said internally as he dashed forward. Right before everyone's eyes, Gustav sped forward like a phantom, causing all the blasts to slam into the wall behind, which in turn teleported the blasts to another location. Just as Gustav was about to touch Sahil, his body turned illusionary as he faded away. Sahil appeared about 100 feet behind. The Zalabans had confused faces at this point as they spotted Gustav in front. What speed? That's not Junior Commander Dart. Attack the imposter. Junior Commander Folan voiced out, causing everyone to dash forward as well. Sahil watched from the other end too, with a look of understanding as he commanded his crew to also deal with Gustav. Chapter 549. Gustav swerved towards the side and dashed across the place, trying to dodge different kinds of attacks. "He's pretty fast, but outmanned," Sahil said with a smile, just as one of the red jackets threw his jacket away, revealing a pair of cannon-like arms. Another one transformed into a yellow beam of light and held up a rifle-like weapon that started getting charged with the yellow light before firing forward. "Thuum, time to go." Sahil stared at the void stone in his hands with a satisfied smile as his body started turning illusionary once again before disappearing completely. A loud bang reverberated across the place as the yellow beam traveled forward, packing immense force with it. Swayai, Gustav bent backward, causing it to pass above him, as his clothes flapped intensely and his hair blew backward from the generated wind. Two of the Zalaban troops, trying to attack him from behind, got blasted into smithereens as it collided with them. It tore straight through their bodies' wind, causing their arms and legs to get blasted towards different parts of the environment, while the beam kept traveling forward till blasted a massive hole in the wall by the side. Before Gustav could raise his body up, one of the red jackets with cannon-like arms was already descending upon him from above. Being unable to dodge in his current position, Gustav pushed himself upwards and threw a fist as he ascended. Bang! Both forces collided, causing a blast to resound in the vicinity as a purplish force radiating with immense energy swept across the vicinity the instant the collision was made. Gustav's body shot backward along with the other person. Two more red jackets were flanking him from the sides with their attacks as his body was still catapulting through the air. He did a flip in midair and slammed his hand on the ground, causing his body to ascend upwards as he dodged the projectiles. However, just as he ascended, two of the red jackets were already aiming for him. He spun in midair, dodging one attack, but the other, who had already leaped up, swung his foot towards Gustav's body. Gustav was only able to react by raising his hand in front of his chest in an X format to block the attack. Bang! The leg, which was laced with a rocket booster, slammed into his arms, causing Gustav to be blasted about 100 feet backward, headed for the ground. As Gustav's body was headed for the ground, Junior Commander Folan suddenly appeared behind him with his palm shooting forward. A star-colored beam could be seen on his palm as it traveled across the air, making sizzling sounds. While Gustav was spinning his body around to deal with this, the red jacket brimming with yellow light shot out another beam towards him, while the other one with cannon arms was also approaching from the side. Dodging all these at the same time would be impossible since all of them were on the same strength level, a little higher than Gustav. At this point, Gustav closed his eyes for a moment. It was as if all the actions in the world had paused just before he opened his eyes. A pinkish flame had appeared within them. Zuwuhun, a massive ray of pinkish energy, suddenly blasted forth from his body, covering the entire vicinity in a matter of moments. Everyone instantly fell to their feet as Gustav spun in midair with a milky-colored blade in his arm. Swish, he swung the blade towards the yellowish beam, causing it to get slashed in half, but he was still pushed backward by the force, as both halves of the beam passed by his side and slammed into the ground behind. Boom! A massive explosion rang out as Junior Commander Folan, who happened to have fallen to his knees behind Gustav, got blasted across the place with his left arm completely disintegrated. He couldn't scream as he had lost control of his body, but the visible look of pain could be seen in his eyes as his body slammed to the ground hundreds of feet away and remained stationary. This time Gustav released his Yarki fully because most of them had power levels higher than him, and he didn't really have the time to restrain it like he used to do, to being put in a very difficult position. The entire street outside had been covered up by the pinkish energy, and everyone was within it were falling to their knees. Within the underground structure, the Zalabans and the Red Jackets, every single person was on their knees with looks of fear on their faces as they stared in Gustav's direction. Gustav breathed in deeply before breathing out, causing the Yarki to start reducing in size. At this point, he had caused a scare across the entire street. He stared at the 10 people around him on their knees, and the 2 corpses blasted nearly to pieces by the sides. They were trying as much as possible to regain control of their bodies, but it was futile. Gustav turned around and dashed towards the wall on the far end. Swoosh! His body blasted through the wall as he arrived underneath a pile of rubble and more destroyed building parts. Thum! He leaped upwards, blasting through the covering of rubble, and appeared in the air above the half-decimated streets. While his body traveled across the air, he spread out his perception, trying to sense if Sahil was still in the vicinity, but just as he had expected, Sahil had completely disappeared. All he could see from above were citizens running from place to place with visible looks of fear on their faces as they spotted his body cutting across the air like a streak. He landed on a building far ahead and continued dashing forward as he tapped the spatial bracelet on his wrist. Location: Region 32, El Caso's place. Tapping on the safe coordinates, a bright flash of light appeared around him as he leaped into the air again and disappeared. Zing. Chapter 550. Tapping on the saved coordinates, a bright flash of light appeared around him as he leaped into the air again and disappeared in midair. Zing! The instant Gustav disappeared, the Zalabans and Red Jackets within the underground structure regained control of their bodies. As they stood to their feet, they looked around the vicinity with fear in their eyes, still wondering what happened a while ago. Dash, who was that man? Dash, what kind of power was that? They voiced out in confusion. Meanwhile, the rest of the Zalabans moved towards Junior Commander Folan to help him up. He was in a very bad state with his left arm and shoulder down to the chest area were completely disintegrated. See what you did to our junior commander. One of them shouted out while pointing a cannon-like weapon at the Red Jacket, glowing with yellow light in the battle earlier. Keep quiet, lackey. If it wasn't for you lots, we wouldn't be in this situation. Why is one of your men after our boss? A thin, masculine voice could be heard from underneath the mask as the Red Jacket also pointed his weapon back at them. That person isn't one of us. As you can see, he attacked us as well, Region Leader Khan voiced out as he stood in the midst of this brawl. That doesn't change the fact that he was able to get here because of you lots. Another Red Jacket voiced out as he also pointed his weapon at the Zalabans. At this point, both sides were about to confront each other as the atmosphere turned tense. Sahil crew outnumbered the Zalabans 6-3 since Junior Commander Folan was down. Still, even though Region Leader Khan didn't participate in the battle earlier, he was among the most powerful mixed bloods present, even stronger than Junior Commander Folan. Junior Commander Folan would have been able to do a better job at fighting since he was stronger than all the Red Jackets in the vicinity, but he could not defend himself from the blast earlier due to being frozen by Yarki just like the others. Now let's all be civilized here. We agree this is a mistake on our part, but as you can see, our side has the most casualties, Region Leader Khan voiced out as he gestured at the two Zalaban troops with scattered body parts and Junior Commander Folan on the ground. He didn't want this to turn into a battle between the two sides, mostly since the successful deal would be cancelled, and they were also outmanned. He might be stronger, but with the coordinated attacks of the six, they would lose. Weehaw! One of them was about to speak when Jabal, who had been behind all this time, interrupted. We're leaving, he said while tapping the button by the side of his head. The others stared at him with a look of confusion. It seemed he had been communicating with someone just a while ago. Mr. Khan, we shall contact you sometime soon to talk about the state of our partnership, Jabal said as he turned to the side and started walking forward while bringing out a piece of equipment. The others brought down their weapons and followed after him. He wasn't the main boss, but whenever the main boss was unavailable, he was always in charge, so they had no choice but to follow. Truinin. A greenish light shot out from the equipment and covered all 6 Red Jackets. In the next moment, the light disappeared along with all 7 of them, Jabal included. The Zalabans fed Junior Commander Folan a recovery pill. They carried him along with them as they moved in the direction of the wall they had appeared from when they first arrived here. Fortunately for them, it was still functioning, and they phased through, appearing back in the building they had used as a channel point to get here. However, the moment they arrived within the building, they could see the chaos that had been inflicted on this place. Karawaichh. Bam! Crumbling sounds could be heard as they spotted parts of the building that had collapsed and parts that had cracks and giant holes all over. All this was because the gateway was still active when they were battling earlier, causing most of the attacks to phase through, which ended up colliding with the building. Meanwhile, Gustav was within the room he rented on his first day here. He sat on his bed with a look of contemplation. Everything that went down today kept replaying in his mind, and he couldn't help but sigh. He never underestimated Sahil after hearing so much about him and seeing reports. However, he never expected Sahil would be so cautious and smart that he would implement things like that. The whole situation played out well. The mission was practically failed at this point, and anyone would have fallen for the trap of planting the tracking device in the wrong person. If he didn't have God eyes, there would be no way to salvage the situation since Sahil now knew that people were after him. His next step would be to hide even more cautiously than before or leave the city. Of course, he could decide not to leave since he knew the tracking device was placed in the wrong person. He had no idea that Gustav could track him using his life sign. Gustav had never seen a more cautious fellow that literally questioned every little detail. If it were to be someone else, they might not bother with the change in color of the eye. Even after Gustav stated the power level of all his crew members, he still decided to run a check on their internal structures. The whole situation got messed up from the point where Jabal spotted him. Gustav hid well enough for no one to see him while he was saving Sahil's life sign, and it only took about 3 seconds for him to get it done. A very short time frame where no one would be able to spot him, but Sahil just happened to be able to sense energy from any source the moment it was emitted. Chapter 551. Gustav reckoned the tracking bug that entered into him was unable to be sensed due to the fact that it was inside him. If the tracking bug had emitted any form of energy before it infiltrated his system, he would have sensed it. At the moment, Gustav had transformed back to his original look and took off the black Zalabin outfit. It was placed on the bed right beside him. He knew he couldn't play this character anymore. It would have already spread around the Zalabins by now that anyone looking like Junior Commander Dart was an imposter. While Gustav was contemplating his next plans, the communication device on the table rang. It was from the base in Ruhuggy City. Gustav answered the call and instantly heard the excited voice of Officer Gooseman from the other end. "Congratulations, Officer Crimson. You have completed the mission, Gustav. We didn't expect you to get it done in such a short time. You're truly a prodigy." Officer Tron's voice was also heard from the other end. True. I never doubted you though, but this is excellent performance." They didn't even give Gustav the chance to talk back before showering praises on him. "Now the next step is extraction. We're currently planning that for you, or will you be able to find a way to leave yourself?" Officer Gooseman voiced out before keeping quiet. Gustav finally got the opportunity to speak. "The mission isn't complete yet," Gustav voiced out. "Huh? What do you mean by isn't complete? Stop trying to mess with us, kid. We can pinpoint the location of Sahil from here. He's currently on the move in Region 27. Officer Gooseman laughed as he spoke. "That isn't Sahil. That's Sahil look-alike and right-hand man, Jabal," Gustav stated. "Look-alike? Does that mean you put the tracker in the wrong person?" Officer Gooseman asked. "Yes, Sahil played us. Had his look-alike deal with everything at first, and I activated the tracker after managing to get close enough to make contact with him. Only to find out later that it was only his look-alike," Gustav explained, omitting a lot of info. "Damn it, he had a look-alike? We never received reports that he had a look-alike." Even Officer Gooseman was surprised. "Every time we try to catch him, we end up finding out new information so he never runs out of tricks." Officer Lewis' voice was also heard from the other side. Gustav had to readmit that Sahil was extremely good to not only have slipped away from the MBO hands several times, but also have them wondering what other tricks he had up his sleeves. As expected of a newbie, I knew he'd messed this up. Officer Millie, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. "It's not his fault, Millie. Who's to say you wouldn't get fooled in such a situation as well?" Officer Tron disagreed. "Of course I wouldn't. You all give him too much credit for nothing. This is his first field mission, and just like many others before him, he failed," she added. "Gustav, we'll have to extract you. This mission is a failed one already since there is no spare tracking device in your possession." Officer Gooseman had to agree with Officer Millie and see this as a failed mission. "Who said it was a failed mission?" Gustav voiced out with a tone of repression. What do you mean?" Officer Gooseman asked. "Just because I put the tracker in the wrong person doesn't make it a failed mission," Gustav responded. "That tracker is one of a kind because its camouflage ability is one of the best in the world. It is nearly impossible for it to be spotted, which is why it was given to us for this mission, due to the fact that Sahil is no ordinary criminal. We don't even have a spare here, so this mission is a failed one, Officer Gooseman explained. Just give it up, kid. You already did a good job of getting close to him. No cadet would be able to pull that off this fast. If it makes you happy, I also failed my first mission, and unlike you, I was already a full-fledged officer who had spent 4 years in training, Officer Tron narrated, trying to encourage Gustav. I only answered the call for a few reasons. Gustav started speaking. First is because of the lookalike who got implanted. Second is to let you know that I still a tracker on real Sahil, and I will be going after him myself before he escapes from the city, Gustav voiced out strongly. Wait, what? You managed to put a tracker on the real Sahil? How? You're going after him yourself? That is not allowed. Officer Gooseman and Millie voiced out together. Yes, I have a tracker on the real Sahil, but I am the only one that can pin his location, Gustav added. How? And what do you mean you're going after him? We should get you extracted as soon as possible, so you can point us to his location when he is out, Officer Millie voiced out in quick successions with a tone of disbelief. The means is not important. What's important is I can find him. However, I don't know how far the connection between I and the tracker can last, which is why I have to go after him as soon as possible. If I wait till he gets out of the city, I might not be able to keep tracking him, so I have to seize the opportunity while he's still in the city to catch him, Gustav explained. Have you gone insane? He succeeded in fooling you already. What makes you think you'll be able to catch him? Officer Gooseman, he shouldn't be allowed to do this. We should extract him, Officer Millie voiced out. Now this is quite the situation. The mission was only for you to place a tracker on him. This is... Before Officer Gooseman could complete his sentence, the communication was cut. I didn't answer the call to request. I already made my decision, Gustav muttered as he put the communication device away. Chapter 552. I didn't answer the call to make a request. I already made my decision, Gustav muttered as he put the communication device away. On the other side, they thought there was a communication issue and tried getting through to Gustav again, but he didn't bother accepting their call. Keeping the communication device away that kept beeping non-stop, Gustav finally decided to focus on his plans to catch Sahil. Sahil happened to be a peak Falcon ranked mixed blood. Meanwhile, Gustav was still at peak Marshal rank. Using the analysis from the battle before, he knew Marshal rank could fall under the power of his Yarki, but he just had to release more quantity to gain control for more powerful mixed bloods. This was why if he wanted to take control of a mixed blood that was way stronger than him using Yarki, he would have already run out of energy before it was able to take control. At the moment, he only had around 20% of his Yarki energy left due to using it on the Zalabans and Sahil troops earlier. This meant activating Yarki again for the second time would lead to running out of energy, and he would have to spend many days trying to recharge it if it completely ran out of energy. He wouldn't have spent so much energy if he restricted its spread earlier, which meant he could still use it twice a day if he was dealing with someone on Sahil's strength level. However, Gustav didn't want to underestimate Sahil due to this, as he recalled Lucius and his other subordinate, who he fought on his first day here, were able to use their bloodlines while being subjected to his Yarki. He didn't know what Sahil had hidden under his sleeves and how he would react to not controlling his body. One thing Gustav was sure of at the moment was the fact that Sahil definitely would have figured out now that the enemy had the power to subject their bodies to control, which meant he had to act as quickly as possible. Although Sahil wouldn't be in the same location with his lookalike right now to avoid getting caught, he would still be cautious, knowing that there were unknown enemies in the city out to get him, and they could disguise themselves. I'll have to time my usage of Yarki properly if it's ever needed. I need to take him by surprise, catch him before he notices my presence, Gustav said as he brought out the invisibility buttons. He still had about 8 of them left since he had already made use of 2. Gustav transformed into the same face he had been disguising as from day one and brought out a mask from his storage device. The mask was shaped to look like a demon face with 2 long horns at the top. Its deep red color made it look even more menacing. Placing the mask beside him, Gustav changed his outfit to that of a black jacket and pants before sitting on the bed. God Eyes has been activated. His eyes glowed up in the next instant, turning scarlet and green with a hint of gold surrounding his irises. His eyes looked extremely mesmerizing at this point. It was no surprise he'd have to hide when using God eyes in that situation due to the way it looked attractive. Using it out in the open would definitely attract attention. Initiating life signs tracking, Gustav closed his eyes as his vision was being pulled to another location. A crisp slap reverberated across the park-like surrounding within the MBO camp. "You did this to me?" The voice of a young girl laced with a tone of disbelief could be heard. I didn't mean to." The voice of a boy laced with a tone of regret responded. Behind a tall tree, it could be seen that Angie and Indrik stood opposite each other. Angie had a look of disbelief and disappointment on her face as she stared at Indrik, who was looking down with an expression of regret. "I stood up for you more than once. I begged Gustav on your behalf that you would change, and this is what you did to me in return? I am losing my bloodline every day because of you." Angie's fist was tightened up as she vibrated with anger while speaking. Her eyes were already teary, and she was close to shedding a tear, but she held it in. "Every day for the last 7 months, I have worked hard to increase my strength. Every time I pushed myself to the limit, and now you're saying all my efforts will be wasted?" Angie's chest heaved up and down as a wave of mental pain washed over her. "I did. I really didn't mean it. I had no idea this would happen. It has been 3 months since I injected the toxin into you. I wasn't informed of its effects and assumed you were okay since you didn't show any symptoms. I am not that person anymore, I'm sorry." Indrik tried explaining himself. You better hope that the doctor finds a cure for this, or I will finish what Gustav couldn't." Angie's voice was laced with so much hate at this point that Indrik couldn't recognize the sweet and innocent-looking girl anymore. It would seem Angie was unable to deal with the thought of losing her bloodline. She stormed off a moment after saying that, leaving Indrik standing in the same spot with a look of reflection. "I won't resist if that is what you wish for when the time comes. I must have been stupid to think I could just get away with my deeds simply because I am turning a new leaf." Back in the city, Gustav was currently on the move. It was close to evening, and he had only started moving a few minutes ago. Earlier, he figured out the location of Sahi. Still, he had to keep life signs tracking active for a long period due to what he noticed Sahil doing. Chapter 553. Sahil, at that time, was conducting a meeting with some unknown people, which Gustav guessed to be his henchmen. From what Gustav could see, he was handing out a set of instructions displayed on multiple projections. He also noticed stacks upon stacks of advanced weaponry situated in a large store by the side. Even though no audio came along with the activation of life signs tracking, Gustav noted the distribution plans and other locations where their supplies were kept on the outline projection. Gustav was surprised to find out that they had over 10,000 supplies scattered around in different city regions, and according to their plans, these weapons would be sold out and distributed in batches on different days. It didn't look like Sahil planned on upholding the bargain. Still, on closer notice, Gustav figured out that some of these henchmen would be pretending to be another group of advanced weaponry distributors who would then sell to the enemy. Sahil was planning to keep this war going for as long as he could. Gustav also picked from this that Sahil was having this meeting on how things would go for the next 1 to 2 months because of his plan to leave the city. He reckoned that Sahil was leaving either late this night or early the next morning. This was the reason Gustav started to give chase before their meeting ended. He wanted to be in the vicinity as quickly as possible. Using life signs tracking to see from Sahil's point of view, Gustav had no idea where that place was located, but he could sense how to get there through the link from God Eyes. Life signs worked in a way that Gustav would have, like a weird link where he would be able to sense the directions to head in after just connecting to a person's life signs. According to the last time he did this, the link lasted for about an hour before it disappeared, but so long as Gustav had energy, he would always be able to connect back to Sahil's life sign and keep following the link again. Right now, Gustav had left through the front gate of Region 32. The guards there were quite alarmed when they felt the force of the wind blazing past the front gate along with the blurry figure of a person within it. They were at a loss whether this incident was to be reported or not. Gustav once again spotted many citizens of the city stranded in front of the gates with tattered looks. He continued on his journey, knowing that there was nothing he could do to help their predicaments anyways. Swoosh. It was only a matter of time before he arrived at another region and kept traveling southeast. Foom, he would occasionally leap from demolished building to building as he sped forward. From his connection to the link, he could tell that Sahil was currently at the far southern edge of the city. On the map, this was where Region 6 was located, and it would take Gustav nothing less than 4 hours of journeying to get there. The skies would already be dark by the time he got there. He was hoping not to get caught during any battles while he journeyed there. Within a small underground facility, a man with short brown hair and sharp slanted eyes, clad in a blue business suit, slightly leaned against an office table with his fly down. A young and beautiful lady, putting on glasses with long yellow hair, knelt down in front of him with an expression of ecstasy displayed on her face. Her hands were currently placed on his upper thighs area as she spoke. "Please let me," she begged while reaching out to caress his fly area. "Jessica, I am here for business," young Joe said with an uninterested look. "Oh, come on, I can get it excited. Business can come after pleasure," she said while moving her face closer. Young Joe reached out to grab her by the shoulder and stopped her. "That's not how it works," he said while pulling her up. Jessica found herself being raised up as she stood to her feet. "You're my fiancé. We will have lots of time to do this later," young Joe said while reaching to zip his pants up. Jessica pouted while staring at him. "You're always acting so cold to everyone, including me. Do you even love me?" she said with a crestfallen look. Young Joe straightened himself and reached out to grab her jaw before pulling her closer to him with a straight look. He stared into her eyes for a few moments before giving her an intense 15-second-long kiss. Jessica's face glowed up as he separated his lips from hers and asked, "Do you still doubt it?" Her face turned red at this point as she remained silent. Young Joe proceeded to straighten his suit as he stood up properly. "Now back to business. How is the progress with trying to get our man in?" young Joe asked. Jessica brought her mind back to reality and replied to him, "Already done. He should be in already and following after the trails." Minutes later, young Joe walked down the corridor with his guards in tight bodysuits following after him. Toy, he spat to the side of the corridor and brought out a small cloth to clean his lips. "Pass me a bottle of water," he instructed. One of them had a bottle of water appear out of thin air and passed it to him. Young Joe collected it and gulped down half of the contents. "Love? What's that?" "You're only a necessary pawn needed to make my plans smoother." Young Joe had an irritated expression as this thought appeared in his mind. Back in Lialuk City, Gustav had been traveling for about 3 hours now, and the skies had already completely darkened. According to what he had gathered so far, most battles usually happened at night, so he spread his perception far across the place to make sure he would be able to change direction on time the moment he sensed any scuffles. Chapter 554. At this moment, Gustav had made use of life signs tracking thrice, and every time Sahil would be in a different location. This didn't mean he wasn't still in Region 6, but that he kept moving from place to place within the region. Gustav couldn't leave life signs active for too long, since he was journeying through the city currently. He needed his own eyesight to be active, so he would only activate it for a moment to regain the connection he lost with Sahil before continuing on the journey to his location. He was currently in Region 7. He only needed to travel for an hour more before he would get to Sahil's present location. Suddenly, a loud thunderclap resounded in the vicinity as Gustav began to close in on the end of the region. Gustav stared at the sky for a few moments, understanding what was about to happen. He clicked his tongue as he picked up the pace a little, and in the next few seconds, trrh, pit, pat, tra. The rain began to pour down heavily as cold winds blew across the place. It was impossible for a normal person to tell that the weather was turning weird due to the skies being dark, but Gustav had already sensed this earlier. According to the data, Region 6, being at the southern edge of the city, always had weird weather occurrences. The other parts of the city were relatively warm and dry most times of the year, but this place in particular was just weird. It could suddenly start snowing when the sun was out, and for some reason, this wouldn't even make the region colder. It would still be hot, and the snow would melt after some time like it didn't snow at all. Fortunately, This part of the city had a weather regulator machine which always prevented this occurrence from being too extreme. After gliding through the falling rain for a few minutes, Gustav finally arrived in Region 6. Region 6 also barely had destroyed structures. As he dashed through the streets out of 30 structures, Gustav could only see about 3 to 4 decimated ones, which meant that this part of the city was also similar to Region 32. The war barely reached here, and this could be attributed to the weird weather occurrences. Sahil was first thought to be hiding out in Region 32, and now he had traced him here. Through this, Gustav could tell that Sahil hid in locations where the civil war had not really affected. Gustav couldn't see a single soul in the street, and knowing that his presence might alert people in the vicinity with his speed and the mask he was putting on, he decided to slow down. Gustav stopped running completely after closing in on Sahil's location. At this point, he was only 5 minutes away, and the whole area seemed extremely quiet, like a dead-end street. Gustav could see several bungalows to 10-story structures in the vicinity, but spreading his perception around, he could barely sense any presence within these buildings. There were a few people in some of them, while others were just void of any life. At this point, his connection with Sahil faded completely since it was already an hour again, so he would have to activate life signs to track him once again. Gustav slowly moved towards the direction of the building on the side and took off his mask. He had several reasons for putting this on from the moment he left Region 32, and now he had to put it away so as not to arouse any suspicions at the moment. His entire body was drenched at this point, and there would be occasional rumbling from the sky. Gustav arrived at the front porch of the building by his side and stayed underneath the roofing for cover. His jacket was dripping wet down to his boots. He still had a different face, so he wasn't really concerned about his looks right now. Gustav proceeded to activate God Eyes. God Eyes has been activated. As his eyes transformed and glowed up, he closed them to focus his vision. Initiating life signs tracking, the instant his vision started to warp, a voice was suddenly heard from behind. "Who's there?" Gustav opened his eyes as he heard that and turned around. The voice came from within the house. "I didn't sense that anyone inside earlier," Gustav thought. His plan initially was to break in and get cover from the rain before tracking Sahil again, but he decided to stay on the front porch. He was glad he didn't break in now. Catch him. The door slid open, and a buff 79 tall male with a buzz cut and dark skin tone lowered his back along with his head before stepping through the door. "Who are you?" he asked with a suspicious glare. "I needed shelter from the rain." At this point, Gustav's eyes had returned to normal. This was officially the tallest person Gustav had met in his life. 9 inches taller than Eldris, who was said to be the tallest in their set. Even without trying to scrutinize this person, it was obvious that he was a mixed blood. Normal humans didn't have abnormal growth like this, and there were mixed bloods said to be over 12 feet tall. This was without transforming into any creature whatsoever, just them in their normal form. "This area is off limits. If you're looking for shelter, you'll have to find somewhere else," the massive buff man stated. "This area? From where to where exactly?" Gustav asked with a look of confusion. "The entire block. You'll need to go back over there," he said while pointing in the direction Gustav came into this street from. "The rain is still falling." Gustav responded, "What are you new here? This is normal around here." "Beat it, kid. You're not supposed to be here in the first place," the buff man stated with a commanding tone. Gustav looked around the place suspiciously for a few moments before turning around. Fine, H didn't want to arouse any suspicions, so he decided to leave just as this man had demanded. Chapter 555. As Gustav walked away from the structure, the buff man kept staring at his figure, waddling through the wet street. It seemed he was trying to make sure Gustav was indeed leaving and not trying to loiter around. After seeing Gustav's figure disappear into the distance, he slowly moved back into the structure with a gratified look. Gustav, who just happened to have arrived at the front of the street, had a look of contemplation as he thought, "There's something off about that man and this entire vicinity. I need to find somewhere close by to hide out in the meantime and observe this area." Not only did he not sense the man, but Gustav could also tell that he was a mixed blood stronger than he was. Stronger than all the mixed bloods he had encountered in Lialuk City so far. The problem was, according to the data, Gustav's strength level was already considered to be among the strongest here. It was usual for him to see someone stronger, but it wasn't supposed to be to that extent. This left Gustav in a state of deep contemplation as several thoughts came to his mind. The sound of a window opening from the house on the left brought him out of his reverie. He was back in the area where people actually resided within the buildings in the vicinity. Gustav locked eyes with a middle-aged woman who was opening the window of a room on the second floor. Gustav turned away and focused his eyes on the road again as he continued walking under the raging weather. As he walked several feet ahead again, he heard someone call out to him from behind. "Hey, kid!" Gustav turned around and noticed the front door of the building he passed earlier opened. The same woman he locked eyes with earlier could be seen standing in front alongside an old-aged man. When they noticed Gustav still staring at them from up ahead without any intention to move, the woman tapped a bracelet on her wrist. A bluish ray shot out of it, forming a transparent umbrella force that floated above her head. She walked towards Gustav while speaking. "You can come in till the rain goes down, Are you sure?" Gustav asked while staring into her eyes as he arrived under the covering of the transparent umbrella. "Don't worry, it's of no inconvenience to us whatsoever. Come on, let's get you all dried up." She spoke with a kind tone while gently pulling Gustav along with her. Gustav followed after reading her eyes and expression. He could tell that there were no nefarious intents behind them wanting to help him, so he didn't mind going with her. After a few moments, they arrived within the house, and Gustav was ushered to sit, but he remained to stand, not wanting to get their sofa wet. The woman wanted to assist with drying his clothes, but Gustav declined again, telling them he could handle it himself. SSSHHHHSSSHHH, a sizzling sound started ringing out as steam began drifting from Gustav's being while he stood in place. He had activated his flaming bloodline, but only partially. He only made the temperature of his body rise to the extent that it caused the water on his body to evaporate. The old man and the woman nodded after witnessing this. Gustav sat down after a while, and they brought him tea, but of course he didn't bother with taking a sip. Silence reigned within the living room as these two did not even question Gustav or find out more about him. "You both are really okay with letting a stranger into your home?" Gustav finally broke the silence. "There is no harm in rendering assistance to someone who needs it," the woman responded while the old man nodded at her response. "Stop being naive, ma'am. This city is currently in a state of internal conflict. You can't be doing dangerous things like letting strangers into your home," Gustav reprimanded harshly. Both of them were quite surprised to hear Gustav speaking this way, but they knew he was making sense. "What if I was here to kill you?" His eyes turned fierce as asked. "We're not so important that someone would be sent after us," the woman stated with a light chuckle. "Besides, after losing our Chilanka, we don't care if we lose our lives while helping anyone," she added. At this moment, Gustav locked eyes on the holographic portrait on the right side of the room and noticed the third person aside from the couple in the frame. It was a young man who seemed to be in his 20s. He had similar looks to them both. Gustav realized that this person was their child who was dead. The woman narrated a bit of the experience, claiming he died in this war and was on the side of the groups against the world government gaining control. Gustav felt sorry for them, but he also felt that it was foolish to put yourself in harm's way for a war when you can barely change anything. At the same time, he understood that some people had a very strong sense of justice and would literally give their lives away if it meant standing for something. At least now he understood that this couple was not afraid of death due to the death of their son and their inability to reproduce anymore. After a few more minutes of silence, Gustav asked to use the bathroom. They gave him directions, and he moved upstairs. Gustav activated God Eyes while moving along the corridor and stared at the full structure of the house. He saw the direction that led to the balcony area and followed it. A few moments later, Gustav opened the door that led to the balcony area and walked along the top of the two-story building. The rain was still pouring at this time, and over 2 hours had gone by. It was close to 12 midnight. Gustav still had God Eyes activated, but he didn't use life signs tracking yet. He walked towards the balcony's ledge and turned his vision towards the area where he last sensed Sahil. Chapter 556. He walked towards the balcony's ledge, and turned his vision towards the area where he last sensed Sahil. Gustav's eyes zoomed in on the street ahead, seeing a bright world of red in front of him. However, he was able to see clearly, especially through the internal structures of solid surfaces. His sight traveled about 2,000 feet up ahead as he focused it on the right side of the street, on the exact building where he stood at the front porch earlier. Seeing through the building, he spotted the bulky figure of the man who had sent him off earlier. The man seemed to be sitting on a sofa, staring at the projection of a screen that was displaying a live-action movie. I thought he was above the Falcon rank. How come I wasn't able to sense his presence earlier then? Gustav wondered with a slightly disturbed expression. He had sensed every other person within different buildings in the vicinity back then. But even when standing in front of this particular building, he didn't sense this man. Gustav was sure that this person was above the Falcon rank earlier when he came out of the building, so this didn't make sense. Gustav proceeded to look at other parts of the building and noticed stacks and stacks of acrylic-looking boxes arranged on top of one another. There were so many acrylic-looking boxes within this building, and Gustav was able to count their numbers within seconds and analyze the contents within. Just within this building, there were over 1,563 boxes. There was also a basement where these same types of boxes were stacked up, and Gustav noticed one more thing. There were several corpses there as well. Within the boxes were advanced firearms and different kinds of technological machinery. This was also what Gustav suspected, and he wasn't wrong with his assumptions. He proceeded to check other buildings in the vicinity. Gustav found around 12 buildings to be just like this one, all stacked with the same kind of boxes and different kinds of technological machinery stored within. Some buildings had a person or two within, while others didn't have anyone at all. Gustav counted all the men within the buildings were these weapons, which were about 7. Every single one of them was higher than him in mixed blood rank. He came across a particular building where every single one of the people within had masks and were clad in red jackets. The instant he spotted them, Gustav took note of their numbers to be around 12 within a building. Then there was another building adjacent to that with the same number of red jacket people within, and then the last building in the vicinity happened to be stationed in their midst. This particular one had only 2 red jackets wearing red masks instead of black. These 2 stationed themselves like guards in front of a particular door. Gustav was about to zoom his eyes once more to look through the door, but God's eyes had reached its limit at this point. That building was the very last in that vicinity, and there was a barricade surrounding the back that prevented entry from behind. Gustav zoomed out with God's eyes. At this point, he knew this operation wouldn't be as easy. He already knew that before, but now seeing that Sahil had around 30 henchmen in the vicinity with half below his rank level, a quarter on the same level and the last quarter higher than his rank level. With that amount of powerhouses on his side, it would be a disaster if Gustav was spotted on this operation, which meant he had to sneak in and get the job done covertly. Gustav already had ways of doing this, but he was still unaware of the plan Sahil had up his sleeves. I need to have a backup plan just in case things go south. I need to be able to create a great chaos, Gustav said while looking up at the pouring rain. Suddenly his eyes widened slightly as an idea popped into his mind. I need to find its location. System, Gustav called out to the system internally, seeming to already have figured out Gustav's plans. Are you sure? This might be a bit too much, the system voiced in his head. Don't worry, I'm sure they'll have a backup. It might only take a bit of time to replace it with that, and that time will be enough for me to use that to my advantage, Gustav explained. All right. Pinpointing location now. A few minutes later, a map had appeared in Gustav's mind. He nodded in gratification and proceeded to activate God's eyes again. Time to find Sahil, Gustav said internally as he initiated life signs tracking. His vision was pulled to another location as he closed his eyes to focus once again. A few moments later, he found himself looking at the top of a ceiling within a room. Gotcha. A smirk appeared on Gustav's face as he noted the environment. Minutes later, Gustav was walking along the corridor back to the living room of the couple who gave him shade. He had dried himself again after getting drenched, but his boots were still a bit wet. The rain was finally beginning to lessen, so Gustav was ready to leave the household and go to the location he had in mind before visiting Sahil. Arriving at the living room, the couple smiled at him once again with a look of understanding. Oh, I flushed everything down twice, Gustav stated while trying to feign an embarrassed look. He already knew what they thought he was busy with the instant he noticed their stares. It's fine, kid. You don't have to worry about it, the woman said with a kind smile. I'll have to get going now, Gustav voiced out as he reached the middle of the living room. Are you sure? You can still take longer and rest if you want to, she proposed. Chapter 557. Thanks, but I have to leave now. I have business to attend to, Gustav said as he turned around. The old man waved at him with a smile as well. Gustav paused his footsteps and asked, "What happened to him?" Papachi? She inquired while gesturing at the old man. Yeah, him, Gustav responded while turning back around to stare at him as well. He has a chronic speech disorder, which happened after we lost our Chilanka, she explained. There is no medicine available to heal it in the city because of the situation. It has been more than a month, and without medication, his voice is gone, she added while rubbing his forehead affectionately. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav's eyes turned crimson and green as he stared straight through the body of the old man. Gustav wasn't well versed in the medical arts, but he knew quite a lot of human anatomy from doing a lot of research. He wanted to determine if the man could still be healed with medicine, or it had gotten to a stage where only a professional could handle it. The couple stared at him with a weird look as they spotted his glowing eyes scrutinizing the old man. After scanning the state of his body, Gustav nodded and proceeded to tap the button underneath his left sleeve. Zing, a small black cylindrical container appeared in his hand, which he proceeded to hand over to the woman. It's not much, but it's the least I can do. Feed him one and keep the rest for emergency, Gustav stated while turning around to leave. The woman was confused as she opened up the container, causing a medicinal smell to waft across the room. I'll advise you leave this region as soon as possible, Gustav added as he turned his face to the side after opening the door. Things might get crazy soon, he added with a sharp gaze before he turned to look forward and walked out. The couple stared at each other for a while before the woman took out one of the blue pills and fed it to the old man. A healthy glow returned to his face after a few moments of consuming the pill, and then he began to cough. Honey, are you okay? She said while patting his back gently. He kept coughing, so she wanted to bring some water for him. After drinking the water, he smiled. I'm fine, Rosalie, he voiced out. Gasp, her eyes widened in shock. It's been more than a month since she had heard him speak, and she had accepted that he might never go back to normal. Both of them were happy again after so long, and they stared in the direction of the door with looks of contemplation. Just who is that man? The woman wondered out loud. At the moment, Gustav was dashing through the streets of Region 6. Unlike the other regions he had seen so far, Region 6 had ascending roads. As you travel deeper into the region, it extends upwards. Gustav had silent advancement activated as he leaped from rooftops to rooftops occasionally. After about 5 minutes of racing, he could see a massive structure up ahead that looked like the construction of a dam, but it actually wasn't one. A massive neon-colored pillar was positioned in its midst, barricaded by the construction. However, the top, which was circular, was shooting out of the barricade. It had some weird-looking force surrounding it. Finally, Gustav smiled as he spotted it and grabbed hold of another invisibility button before activating it. Around 2 p.m. midnight, Gustav found his way to the top of a massive structure just right outside the street where Sahil and his henchmen were. He squatted atop the pointy rooftop and planned his trajectory. 6,005 feet is my limit, but it's bound to cause a ruckus if I leap from this point with my full force. Gustav thought as he stared at the last 2-story building thousands of feet away. Gustav decided to play it safe and leaped forward towards the building just 200 feet away. Cognitive concealment has been activated. His presence completely disappeared as he landed on the first building within the street positioned on the right. Due to silent advancement, Gustav didn't make a single sound as he sprinted across the rooftop and leaped towards the next. Gustav had his mask on at this point. His full black outfit made him barely visible as well. He could hear the voices of the people in the building sometimes, but none of them had any idea that someone was currently walking on the building. Whoa, he would barely make sounds as he leaped from place to place before arriving at the end of the street. He could see the last building up ahead, a along with the two buildings positioned a few feet in front by the sides. Gustav already saw the trap laced on the last building when he used God Eyes earlier by the entrance and sides of the house. Anyone who fell to the trap would trigger an alarm that would alert everyone, so Gustav was careful. The only way in which he had spotted earlier, as well as through a window at the back. This window was positioned close to the top and bent at such an angle that it would be impossible for Gustav to get there by leaping. To get to the back of the building would raise alarms if he went by foot due to the sides being filled with traps. If he decided to leap over the building and land on its rooftop, he would also trigger an alarm. Landing at the back of the building would also do the same, which meant he needed to find a way to get to the window without making contact with the ground. Going through the back of the street was also impossible because of the barricade. Gustav made calculations as he prepared to leap. I guess it's time I finally made use of it. Chapter 558. Gustav made calculations as he prepared to leap. I guess it's time I finally made use of it. The building was only about 300 feet ahead, but Gustav had decided to leap over it. As he stood properly, he leaped forward with speed. His body traveled upwards and forward in an arc-like trajectory as Gustav stared at the multiple buildings below him, turning smaller. As his body arrived hundreds of feet above the last building, he descended towards its back. It was at this point that Gustav brought out an invisibility button and made use of it. Swish, his body disappeared into thin air in mid-air. Now, not only his presence couldn't be sensed, but his visibility too was gone. As Gustav's body descended towards the back, he spotted the window he was aiming for, which was slanted diagonally. However, due to the way he was falling, it was impossible for him to get to the window, which his back would be facing as he descended to that point unless he could fly. Zwii, just as he fell to that level, which was several 10 feet above the ground level. Hover has been activated, -300 EP, 5. Gustav's body suddenly came to a stop in mid-air right in front of the mirror. His body, which paused in mid-air, was just 1 foot away due to how Gustav calculated his jump. 4. The strange force causing his body to float followed his command as he turned around to face the window in mid-air. Gustav quickly stretched his hand and grabbed hold of the window's edge. 3. The moment he managed to balance his weight on both hands, Hover ran out of time and deactivated on its own. 1. Hover has been deactivated. Unlike other skills, it happened to have a 10-minute cooldown time, which meant Gustav couldn't use it brazenly. Gustav looked down before raising his upper body with one hand while freeing the other. Atomic manipulation has been activated. A milky glow appeared on his right palm, and he proceeded to press it against the surface of the window. Unlike how Gustav usually used atomic manipulation, this time was different. The milky glow phased through the window and started consuming the lock area of the window. This was the same technique Gustav used when dealing with Ben and Hung Zhou back then when he stole this bloodline from Ben. Atomic manipulation was capable of phasing through anything, and he could use the power to destroy something from the inside, but it required key focus and wasn't practical in battle. This was how he caused parts of the atoms that made up Ben's and Hung Zhou's brains to disappear when he was trying to get their memories erased, which made them enter a vegetative state. Even though there were no signs of injury, neither did he leave any trace. He didn't use the power properly, which was why things ended up that way. He didn't mean to turn them into vegetables in the first place. It wasn't practical in battle because he had to focus for a long time to make use of it, and no opponent would wait for that. At this moment, even though Gustav was hanging from the edge of the window, he was very focused as he caused the lock to be eaten up from the inside. In about a minute more, he pushed the window open. It barely made any sound as it slid gently towards the side, and he climbed in. At this point, the invisibility button he used earlier had run out of power, but he still had cognitive concealment activated, so his presence was still unnoticeable. Unless anyone saw him with their eyes, they wouldn't be able to figure out that someone had infiltrated. Gustav walked through the small corridor that happened to be dimly lit. He knew that to get into the room Sahil was sleeping in from here, he would have to turn towards the left when he got to the intersection ahead. But then the guards were positioned at the end of that corridor, right in front of the door to the room where Sahil was located. But right before the last room was a small passageway that led to the left. This small passageway led to one of the dining rooms. The house was pretty large, so it was normal to have multiple dining rooms. Gustav brought out another invisibility button. This means I have 6 left. I better make use of them wisely, Gustav said as he placed it on his forehead and tapped it. Sheeing, he turned invisible once more and turned towards the left of the hallway. Walking silently across it, he could see the 2 red jackets positioned at the end of the hallway. He only had 10 seconds, so he walked quickly and arrived just a few feet away from the door area of the last room. The 2 were oblivious of another presence within this place as they stood like robots. Gustav quickly turned towards the small passageway by the left that led to the dining area. The invisibility ran out when he entered the dining area. The place was empty as expected, and Gustav quickly moved towards the wall by the left. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav made use of God Eyes to look through the wall and spotted Sahil laying on the bed in the next room, sleeping soundly. Atomic disintegration has been activated. Gustav conjured the atomic blade in his hand and started cutting out a massive door-like shape on the wall. Shrii! It sounded like a small hiss as Gustav cut as precisely as he could. Atomic disintegration was powerful, but due to the thickness of the wall, it took a lot of time to make the atoms on the wall disappear fast enough to cut through. It took about 5 minutes for Gustav to completely cut a door shape, which wouldn't break apart on any sides. Chapter 559. He made it fall in his direction and grabbed hold of it before shifting it completely towards the side. Step. Step. Gustav finally stepped into Sahil's room unnoticed. It had taken a lot of time, but he finally got there. He tiptoed towards the bed area while bringing out a yellowish syringe-like tool. Gustav looked around the place, trying to see if there was something he had missed, but aside from the well-structured room and designs of a few arts in place, there was nothing else to be seen. He moved closer to Sahil and was about to stretch out his hand to pull the cover away from his body when he heard the voices of the guards in front of the door. Isn't it about time to wake, boss? Yes, he said by 2:30. Just as that dialogue ended, the door was pushed open. Both of them stared at each other first as they entered before walking forward and arriving in front of Sahil's bed. What is this box doing here? The red jacket on the left asked while staring at the box on the left side of the bed. No idea, but I think boss might have put it there himself. Best not to interfere with it, the other one responded as he moved towards the right side of the bed. As he reached out to touch Sahil, he suddenly stopped. I nearly forgot to deactivate the knot. Haha, this would have turned out really troublesome, he said as he reached towards the bedpost area and tapped on the wooden artistic-looking kettle sticking to it. It emitted a small glow as he tapped some parts of it before sinking into the bedpost. Gustav, who had turned the box by the side, was surprised to find out that the artistically crafted kettle was actually an electronic device. This had him wondering how he missed this with God Eyes. It looked quite normal when he stared at it earlier. He could already guess that it was a kind of mechanism that would have triggered something if anyone had made contact with Sahil whilst it was activated. Now, wake him, the other one voiced out from behind. As Gustav heard this, a hand appeared on the side of the box, which reached out to grab the yellowish-looking syringe-like tool which had rolled towards the side. His hand went underneath the sheets from his side and stabbed the syringe-like tool straight into Sahil's hip area. Sahil's eyes suddenly spread open just before the guard could touch him. "Oh, boss, you're awake," the guard voiced out as he paused his hand a few inches away. To his surprise, Sahil's eyes became weary in the next moment and closed up back. Boss," the one beside him called out to him. "What happened? Did he go back to sleep?" The one behind asked with a look of confusion. "It seems so. He woke up, only to fall back asleep," the red jacket in front said while turning around. "Looks like he's exhausted. The list of plans he put in place must have caused this. Boss is still a person after all, so this is normal," the red jacket behind stated while turning around. "I guess we should leave him to rest for some time then," the one beside Sahil added as he started walking out with the other one. Just as he reached the door, he paused. "Oh, I forgot to reactivate the knot," he said while turning around. Gustav, who was still transformed into a box, became alarmed the moment he heard that and sensed the red jacket walking back. The other one had walked out at this point to go back to standing in front of the door. Earlier, Gustav had hidden his right hand, which he used to do the deed, underneath the sheets since he positioned his transformed body right beside the bed. Doing that made his transformation a little unstable since he was making himself be part thing, part living creature, and now he was barely able to hold on to keep himself this way. Also, if the tot was activated again, he would need to find a way to deactivate it, and he had no idea what it was supposed to trigger or do. The red jacket arrived at the bed area and reached out to touch the bedpost again. Flicking his right arm out, Gustav placed it on the floor before pulling his box-like self underneath the bed. He pulled again till he arrived on the other side of the bed. The red jacket, who was dealing with reactivating the artistic kettle thingy, had no idea that the box was now behind him. His body was slightly bent forward as he tapped several spots on the bedpost. Just as he wanted to tap again, he suddenly sensed powerful energy behind him. However, before he could react to it in his compromising position, Poochie, his eyes widened as blood oozed out of his mouth. His body vibrated as he looked down to see a milky-colored blade stabbing through his chest. The pain only hit him a few moments later as he felt like he was being plunged through by burning energy. He turned around to spot the dark figure stabbing this burning blade into his chest. The demonic mask caused him to muffle a sound, but Gustav had covered his mouth up at this point. Gustav pulled the blade out from behind and stabbed it into the red jacket multiple times. Poochie, 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 even though he had successfully landed the sneak attack, this red jacket was strong enough to still pull a few things if he let him be after stabbing him the first time. Unlike Junior Commander Dart, who was weaker than Gustav, this person was actually stronger. The stronger a mixed blood, the higher their tenacity, which makes it harder to kill them. After leaving multiple holes in his body, Gustav finally deactivated Atomic Blade as the red jacket stopped struggling. Chapter 560. He slowly lowered the body down as blood oozed out like crazy. Gustav proceeded to move towards the door silently and locked it from the inside. The blood of the red jacket was oozing out like crazy, staining the floor bright red. His bloodline might be useful, but there's no time, Gustav thought, feeling like there wasn't enough time to do a bloodline extraction. He proceeded to move towards the bed area and grabbed hold of Sahil. He had injected him with a sleeping toxin to prevent Sahil from waking for the next 24 hours. Gustav tied Sahil to his back for easy movement and proceeded to pick everything he could find in the room that belonged to Sahil. He found the storage device where the void stone was kept and took it with him as well. Time to leave, Gustav said as he looked up. The red jacket at the front of the door had a look of suspicion on his face as he stood there. Liam, what are you still doing in there? It's been 5 minutes already, he voiced out. After waiting for a few seconds and not receiving any response, he reached for the door. Why is this locked? He questioned with a confused look before he started tapping on the door. Liam, what are you doing in there? Open this now, he voiced out. Pa, 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 pa. He kept tapping the door to no avail. Sniff, sniff. Is that blood? He muttered with a look of disbelief as the metallic smell wafted into his nostrils. Tyoun, he suddenly started activating his bloodline as a circular-shaped device glowed in the middle of his chest. Swoosh! Throwing his fist forward, it slammed into the door, and what came next was a small explosion as the door got sent flying backwards with the sides of the wall partly destroyed as well. He stormed into the room only to spot his comrade's mutilated corpse on the side of the bed. He turned to stare at the bed as well and noticed it was empty. His eyes turned blazing green as he looked up and noticed the hole in the roof. A few moments later, a blaring noise rang out all through the street, alarming the entirety of Sahil henchmen. Currently, Gustav was leaping from building to building with Sahil on his back, almost out of the building. A massive projection suddenly appeared in the air displaying Gustav's look and footage of how he leaped through the roof with Sahil in his grasp. The entire street instantly turned chaotic as the red jackets filed out of the buildings along with those in the building with firearms. They instantly understood that their assignment was to find Gustav and get Sahil back at any cost. At this point, Gustav just leaped off the last building at the start of the street. His figure disappeared into the distance as his body traveled across the air. The person who had just moved out of the building managed to spot the small black frame disappearing into the distance. He quickly turned towards the side and dashed forward towards the gathering of the red jackets. He went this way, he voiced out while pointing in the direction Gustav was headed for. Everyone instantly stared in that direction and charged forward with intensity. Some of them brought out the hover cars and chased after Gustav, while others jumped from building to building, chasing after him. Sprint has been activated. Gustav's speed suddenly increased exponentially as he activated Sprint and dashed across another street after sensing the crowd headed for him from behind. Some red jackets had stayed behind to activate some long-range weapons. Swoosh, his body cut a blazing black streak across the streets as he dashed forward and leaped from wall to wall. Even though some of these red jackets were fast, they couldn't keep up. Only those in vehicles were starting to close upon him. Seeing, Gustav suddenly felt a spiraling force headed to him from behind. Without turning around, he already sensed that it was a missile-like projectile locked onto his figure. Seeing, he suddenly sensed 7 more approached as well. Thumb, he leaped several hundred feet into the air and spun around while conjuring the atomic blade. Slash, slash. He cleaved the first 2 in half, causing a massive explosion to occur in the sky while his frame got covered in a cloud of flames. However, Swihai, his body blazed through without any injuries, along with Sahil still strapped to his back. The others were still headed in his direction. He moved in a zigzag format to dodge them, but even though he did, they still turned around to head for him since they were locked onto him. Slash, slash, slash. Even though they were moving faster than Gustav, it was easy to predict their movement since they were only locked onto him. Boom, boom, boom. More explosions rang out as Gustav managed to destroy every single one of them, barely causing destructions to the buildings in the vicinity. The region was in a panic as they heard the explosions, but they had no idea that this was just the beginning. Gustav leaped several thousand feet into the air, traveling at a very fast speed when he heard the sound of more projectiles headed for him. He landed on a main wide road where there was enough open space. Since it was midnight, no vehicle was currently moving on, so he felt it might be better to handle the projectiles here. Gustav still kept dashing forward, leaving a blurry trail. As the projectiles arrived at his location, Gustav reached out to destroy them again, but to his surprise, the projectiles suddenly transformed into masked men clad in red jackets. This took Gustav by surprise as all 3 men threw attacks forward at Gustav. One swept his leg forward on the ground, trying to tackle Gustav's foot. Another was stabbing towards Gustav's throat with a glowing blue blade, while the third one had massive gauntlets on his arm, which he swung towards Gustav's head from above. Chapter 561. Gustav jumped up a little while spinning in midair with his leg swung out. The blade missed his throat due to this, and his leg slammed into the face of the red jacket that stabbed forward. Fly-high, his entire body was catapulted backwards by the force of Gustav's foot. Gustav landed behind the red jacket, who tried tackling his footing. Still, before he could make any more actions, the red jacket with the massive gauntlet descended with his fist thrown down. Bang! A loud collision rang out as Gustav crossed his arms to block the strike from the gauntlet's covered fists 2 times his head size. Cracks appeared all over the road as chunks from the road blasted in every direction. Gustav's legs lowered a bit due to the force. Before he could act again, the other red jacket by the side, which Gustav dodged, shot out a beam from his mechanical arm. Gustav leaped backwards to dodge, causing it to slam into a massive building by the side, which blasted a hole right through it. From behind, the other red jacket swung the bluish glowing blade at him again, which created a blue arc of energy that hacked forward with intensity. Swoosh! Gustav dashed towards the side, while conjuring the atomic blade again. Flumsh! He charged forward and swung the milky blade towards this red jacket. Gustav was still too fast for him to react too quickly, so he stabbed towards the side as well, not minding that he might get injured. Gustav noticed the blade and bent forward while changing his attack trajectory. Just as he was about to slice through his waist area, the red jacket with massive gauntlet-covered arms arrived behind Gustav, swinging his fist intensely. Combination has been activated. Sprint plus dash. Swoosh, Gustav suddenly swerved towards the side at the last moment, causing the red jacket to punch his comrade in the face. Bang! A loud cry of pain rang out as they both landed attacks on each other. The one with gauntlet-covered arms was unaffected by the stab due to it barely grazing him. His comrade, on the other hand, had been sent flying backwards with a cracked skull. Gustav dashed towards the shocked red jacket back and jumped up before spinning around while swinging out his right hand. The red jacket was able to react on time by quickly raising the gauntlet-covered hand to block his neck. Shreve, due to its toughness, he could not cleave through completely on cutting a few inches into it. From behind, the other red jacket was already lunging forward at Gustav while shooting. Zwii, Gustav dodged them by moving back and swerving left and right quickly. He turned to the side and dashed towards the red jacket. No time to keep messing around, he said internally as his arm suddenly increased immensely in size. Size manipulation has been activated. His arm became as large as the red jacket as it shot forward and covered him instantly. Gustav had grabbed hold of him and lifted him into the air like a chick unable to resist. The red jacket with the gauntlets had managed to recover himself at this point and dashed forward towards Gustav. Gustav only swung his massive arm, slapping him towards the side. Bang! He slammed into the wall of a building, and Gustav raised his hand and threw it at his body, which was lodged in the wall. Bang! Both masked red jackets broke through the wall as Gustav slammed the one in his grasp into the other one. All three of them still had confusion in their minds before Gustav put them out of commission. They hadn't even gotten to ask who he was, which was the question ringing in their minds the most after seeing Gustav's skill set. After putting them out of commission, Gustav turned around to start dashing forward again. Swoosh! At this point, he could already sense the incoming vehicles headed for him with speed. Hover cars were actually very fast, so he reckoned they would be catching up with him soon. As one of the hover cars coming from behind arrived at the spot where Gustav had just finished dealing with the red jackets, three bluish orbs suddenly appeared in the middle of the road. Boom! A massive explosion sent the hover car flying with multiple parts dislodging from it as the red jackets within were set ablaze. Kirsch! There were screams of pain heard from behind, which drifted into Gustav's ears as he kept dashing across the road. I need to get outside the region for it to work. 20 minutes. Gustav muttered as he kept dashing along the road. The other hovercars bolted past the flames on the road, not even bothering to stop for a second to inspect the area whether there were any survivors or not. Gustav could sense them getting closer behind him. There were a lot of attacks he couldn't use at the moment so as not to cause too much destruction to the surroundings. However, he still had many options so long as he didn't get crowded by the many red jackets whose power levels were higher than his. One of the red jackets within a hovercar had a part of his body out the window by the side as he stared at Gustav through a scope. Locked on, he muttered as the sniper-like weapon in his hand glowed with profound energy. Click! Thuwum, yellowish energy shot forward with intensity, cutting a bright line across the air as it traveled towards Gustav. Gustav sensed this energy and turned around to slash it in half. Fwyi, the atomic blade cleaved right through it, and both halves traveled past him before slamming into the road behind, causing a loud blast. Confirmed. It's him. The person who shot the yellowish beam voiced out to the other three in the car. He has an entirely different body structure than before. What's going on here? The other red jacket in the front seat voiced out with a look of confusion. Chapter 562. He has an entirely different body structure than before. What's going on here? The other red jacket in the front seat voiced out with a look of confusion. They recognized Gustav as the same person impersonating Junior Commander Dart back then because the four who were currently within this hovercar were amongst the 6 red jackets Sahil brought along with him the other day. We have to take him out before he uses that power again. One of them voiced out as they recalled the pinkish energy that caused everyone to submit. We don't have to be worried about that. I don't think he would use that power casually. If it was something he could use all the time, he wouldn't have fled back then, another one stated. Still, we cannot dispute the fact that he would be able to make use of it at least once. We would find ourselves in a disastrous situation if we get too close, and he uses it against us. We have to take him out from afar, the red jacket, which was glowing with yellow color, voiced as he put half his body through the window again. The person driving slowed down a bit and started moving the hovercar at a moderate speed to prevent moving too close to Gustav, but they were moving fast enough to keep up with him. Boom, boom, boom. More projectiles were shot out from the hovercar towards Gustav, a few hundred feet ahead. Gustav proceeded to dodge every one of them with precision like he had eyes behind his head. The more they fired at him, the more astonished they became, not understanding how he was able to keep up with the attacks. 2 hover cars bolted forward from the sides, slowly overtaking the one in the middle. Don't get too close to him, the red jacket, who glowed a bright yellow color along with his sniper-like weapon, voiced out to the car by the left. They ignored his voice and zoomed forward even faster, closing in on Gustav. These fools, he voiced out with a tone of disapproval. The ones by the right also ignored the warnings and zoomed forward, closing in on Gustav's figure. We can make use of their foolishness to land a hit on him. Let's wait till he gets crowded, the other red jacket sitting on the right suggested. Their hovercar remained behind the other 2 as they maintained their speed and waited for an opening. Gustav noticed these 2 hovercars closing in on him from behind. He would still occasionally dodge projectiles shot at him from all vehicles. As these 2 arrived a few feet behind by his left and right simultaneously, Gustav conjured an atomic blade again, but this time on both his hands. Screeve, screeve. Both of them accelerated simultaneously to smash him together on both sides. Fly, Gustav jumped up a little, causing them to miss him, and landed on both hovercrafts with his right and left legs stomping on their front. The 2 cannons positioned on the bonnet area of the hovercars turned to face Gustav, but before they could shoot, Shwayai, he swung both blades towards the sides at the same time, cleaving them in half. Boom. A small explosion happened, which caused both hovercars to swerve forward and nearly somersault in midair. Gustav pushed himself forward using the force from both cars, traveling several hundred feet across the air. Boom. A shot was heard behind as a yellowish streak cut across the air headed for Gustav, who was still in midair. The shot was fired in such a way that it would collide with Gustav's body as he descended. Hover has been activated. Gustav's body suddenly floated upward a little as he spread his legs wide. Fwyoe, the yellowish streak passed underneath his torso area, barely missing his crown jewels below, and slammed into the road ahead. Boom. A large explosion blasted across the vicinity as a crater appeared on the road. Gustav's body descended once again and landed on the road before as he resumed dashing forward. The red jackets behind had looks of disbelief on their faces after seeing Gustav's actions. He can fly? They voiced out with looks of disbelief. The one who had timed well and shot out the yellowish beam earlier couldn't believe his eyes after seeing the way Gustav suddenly floated upwards instead of descending. If he could fly at will, he would have done that already. I doubt he can properly use that ability, he voiced out with a logical tone. The others within the hovercar agreed with him as well. Gustav resumed dashing forward as he counted down, 15 minutes left. He turned towards the left after arriving at an intersection and kept running amidst a lineup of tall buildings positioned by the sides of the road. The 2 hovercars who were closing in on him from behind earlier closed in on him again. Unlike last time, both cars didn't try to hit him at the same time. Instead, they swerved and changed lanes as one of them moved to his front while the other positioned right behind him. The top of both hover cars swept open, and 2 fierce-looking red jackets jumped out. One of them was on a triangular-looking glider, which had a bluish flame drizzling out of its bottom, while the other landed at the back of the car right in front of Gustav and jumped forward. Gustav swerved towards the side to dodge the person who had leaped forward, but as he arrived by the side, the other red jacket on the triangular glider had also moved towards that direction. A massive metallic-looking pole appeared in his hand, which he swung towards Gustav. Gustav swung his fist out in response, which resulted in a collision that sent him sliding towards the side. The moment his fist made contact, a weird recoil redirected part of the force from the attack towards him. Chapter 563. The moment his fist made contact, a weird recoil redirected part of the force from the attack towards him. Gustav was nearly hit by the hovercar behind. Due to the close collision, the red jacket that jumped backward earlier grabbed hold of a part of Sahil's arm, which was also strapped to Gustav's back. Gustav felt the pull from behind, slowing him back, and knew what was happening, but the problem was how to counter. While he was hindered by this from moving forward faster, the other on the triangular glider was also charging towards him while swinging out the pole again. Gustav jumped upwards and did a flip while twisting in midair. Not only was he able to dodge the pole this way, but he was also able to get the person pulling on Sahil's arm from behind to release his grip. The instant Gustav landed behind him right on the hovercar, he swung his foot forward with force. Bang! His leg slammed into the head of the red jacket, causing him to be sent flying forward before slamming into the hovercar, moving in front and landing on the road. Cricuum, a weird noise was heard from underneath the car as the hovercraft glided over him. The other one on the triangular glider had moved out of the way to prevent his comrade from slamming into him, and now he was charging towards Gustav again. The glider traveled so fast across the air that it looked like a flying phantom. Gustav had limited space while standing in the car, so he quickly conjured another atomic blade and started clashing with this red jacket. Slash, slash, bang. While they clashed repeatedly, another red jacket was trying to make their way out of the hovercar in front. Gustav jumped into the air and threw the atomic blade forward the instant he spotted his body coming halfway through the hole atop the hovercar. Swihwine, a jet of blood sprayed onto the top of the hovercraft as this red jacket was cleanly decapitated. The red jacket swinging the pole around saw this as an opportunity and swung the pole towards Gustav's face as his body descended from the air. Gustav raised his hand and grabbed onto the pole tightly. Phoom! His body was nearly swung towards the side, but he didn't let go and made use of that to spin around in midair while throwing out two round objects. What came next was an explosion. Boom! The red jacket was blasted off the glider towards the side and slammed into the road. I'm going to have to use my overcharge, the red jacket within the car far behind basking in a yellow glow voiced out. Are you sure? The one in front asked with a look of wariness. No matter how many openings I find on this guy, my shots never meet him because his senses and reaction time is on a high level, the red jacket with the sniper-like weapon stated. We're gonna have to warn the others in front, the one beside them voiced out. Don't bother. We'll have to sacrifice them, so he won't get suspicious. He'll only notice at the time it gets fired, which would be too late to dodge. As the red jacket finished saying this, he pushed his body partly out the window and aimed at Gustav again, staring at his frame through a scope. At the moment, Gustav was on the glider trying to control it after blasting its owner away, but it was proving impossible. It would seem only the owner could make it work. Gustav jumped back down as his arms increased in size and muscularity, becoming that of the mutated bull as he swung out both atomic blades in his grasp with force. Shri Rai, the hovercar was divided into two halves as the milky-colored 3-feet blades cut across them fiercely, carrying immensely sharp energy, which also caused a long slash mark to appear across the road. Boom! An explosion went off after this, blasting the remaining red jackets within across the place as they were set ablaze. Gustav charged forward with his gigantic arm, ready to deal with the other hovercar in front. Meanwhile, behind a red jacket within the hovercar was gathering a massive amount of energy as he prepared to fire at Gustav. Just as Gustav was dealt cleave the hovercar in front into two halves, an explosion went off behind him. Zui-eyed, a yellowish streak carrying an immense wave of energy traveled forward, causing the middle of the road to be ripped apart from its force as it blazed across the air. Gustav suddenly turned around as his body turned green and bloated as he stomped the ground. A diamond-like wall suddenly sprouted out from the ground before him as this yellowish streak arrived. Boom! A massive mushroom cloud appeared in the middle of the road as a loud blast rang out. Phew! It spread across the radius of 500 feet, consuming everything in its way as even the buildings by the side had parts of their walls collapsing with windows blasting into pieces. The shockwaves slammed into the hovercar where the attack came from and sent it flying backward by a few feet. It somersaulted several times in the air before landing, stabilizing itself a few hundred feet behind. Damn, Raheem. You're one hell of a bastard, the other red jacket beside him voiced out as he noted the damage done to the surroundings. I had forgotten how destructive your ultimate power move was. If Boss didn't have that protective device that would activate to shield him, we wouldn't be able to use an attack of this scale without the risk of getting him killed as well. The one in front also voiced out as he stared at the buildings by the sides up ahead still vibrating from the sheer force. But I saw him put up a defense before the explosion went off. Raheem, the one who had fired the attack, spoke. Chapter 564. But I saw him put up a defense before the explosion went off. Raheem, the one who had fired the attack, spoke. There is no way he'll survive that. Only the boss will still be in one piece because of the protective device, the driver said while staring at the massive embodiment of flames that covered the road up ahead. About 300 feet behind them, a figure stood atop a 50 feet tall building and stared in the direction of the blast. Looks like he got taken care of, the 79 male wearing a black tank top muttered as he prepared to turn around. Just as he was about to do that, he noticed a very tiny figure moving out of the flames up ahead. He survived, he mumbled as he saw the figure dart through the flames ahead, disappearing into the distance. The man looked down the road at the only hover car that could be seen positioned hundreds of feet behind the flames. Those fools, he muttered before leaping forward. As the red jackets within the hover car moved out of the vehicle, they heard a loud whooshing sound from above. A dark shadow was cutting through the air with immense speed headed for their location, and by the time they noticed, bang, the figure had landed in front of them. Zergeref? They exclaimed at the same time after noticing this 79 buff man. You didn't hit him and now he's getting away, the man said with a loud tone. What? You must be mistaken. Haha. There's no way he's alive right now, the group voiced out. Zergeref raised one eyebrow up and turned around to start walking towards the flames. His foot made stomping sounds on the ground as he arrived before the flames and raised one of his legs up, bringing it down with force. A wave of wind spread across the surroundings that cleared out the fire instantly. Flum, the group below had looks of awe as their red jackets blew backward due to the fierce wind. Their eyes widened in the next instant as they stared at the damaged road. A massive crater had appeared in the middle, but no one could be seen within it. Zergeref turned around to stare at them. I doubt you even managed to harm him in the slightest, he voiced out. All four of them were dazed and kept their mouths open in disbelief, not knowing what to say for a while. But how is this even possible? He even made use of multiple abilities, one of them voiced out with a tone of confusion. Zergeref scoffed after hearing that, and turned around to start walking forward once again. Gather everyone up and come take the boss back after I have destroyed the culprit, he voiced out before stomping his right foot on the ground once again. Phew whoop, his figure lifted into the air with immense speed and disappeared from their line of sight. He's truly finished now that Zergeref is involved, the red jacket who was driving earlier voiced out. Let's gather the rest and meet up with him like he said, Raheem voiced out as they got back into the hover car. They were still finding it hard to believe what they had gone through, and more than anything, they wanted to find out the identity of Gustav. As they drove back, they could see other figures leaping across the air, headed for the same direction as Zergeref. 10 minutes away, Gustav muttered as he bolted across the road at speed close to sound. He had already started closing in on the outskirts of Region 6. Even though Region 6 was at the edge of the city, he would still have to get back to Region 7 before he would be able to leave here. If he tried leaving the city from Region 6 instead of going back, he would be going in the wrong direction, and it would even take more work to leave. As Gustav dashed across the street, he could hear a loud whooshing sound behind him coming from the air. This caused him to turn alert as he wondered what would be moving at such speed. The instant Gustav turned his head to the side to stare at the sky behind, he spotted a black object headed for him from above. As it entered his range of perception, Gustav's eyes widened slightly, and he proceeded to jump to the side. Bang! A loud sound of collision rang out as this black object landed in the middle of the road where Gustav was standing earlier. And it just happened to be a person, not a black object. Gustav paused, kept sliding back by several feet even after coming to a stop due to the force which he made use of when swerving right. "So it was you?" Zergerev voiced out with a deep tone before chuckling. Gustav instantly recognized this man to be the same person who told him to leave when he approached their street earlier. "So what if it was me? I don't have the time to mess around, so we'll have to get serious now," Gustav stated while slowly transforming into the combination of the blood wolf and mutated bull again. Not only was Gustav trying to preserve energy by not combining more, but he was also trying to keep his mask on while he was transformed, so his head had to remain in its usual human shape. "Oh, I see. I can sense that your energy just increased, but it is nothing compared to someone with true experience," Zergerev voiced out as he stomped on the ground. Flumsh, waves of silver-like streaks burst forth the instant he did that. Gustav moved towards the side, trying to dodge but was still hit by some weird metallic sounds. "What is that?" he wondered in his mind as he shook off and dashed forward towards Zergerev. Gustav threw his fist forward, which Zergerev dodged with ease, and proceeded to send a palm strike forward. Fwaya Gustav moved to the side to dodge, but a circular wave shot out of the palm, which slammed into the building by the side, creating a massive boulder-sized hole within. Shriek. This time Gustav staggered backward as a loud metallic sound rang profusely in his ears. Bang! Zergerev's fist slammed into Gustav's gut the next moment, sending him flying towards the building on the left. Chapter 565. Zergerev's fist slammed into Gustav's gut the next moment, sending him flying towards the building on the left. Gustav did a flip in midair and landed on the side of the wall with his legs before pushing himself forward with immense force. Bang! The wall caved in, blasting to the side as Gustav arrived back in front of Zergerev with an outstretched hand. Zergerev moved towards the left at the last instant and threw out his left palm towards Gustav's ribs area as his body shot forward. Gustav felt the rippling shockwaves headed for him and spun his body in midair, while also throwing out his own palm in response. Palm strike has been activated. His palm and Zergerev collided, causing both of them to be blasted backward. But once again, weird metallic screeching sounds played out in Gustav's ears, messing with his movement. He uses the power of sound. That's why he's able to predict my movements, Gustav analyzed as he landed back on the ground and dashed forward once again to clash with Zergerev. Who is this person? I can sense from his bloodline energy that he's just a martial rank, and yet he's able to trade blows with me? Zergerev was astonished as he repeatedly clashed with Gustav. Even though he was using different sounds to mess with Gustav and slow his movements, Gustav could still keep up with him. He jumped backward, dodging another of Gustav's punch that nearly slammed into his gut. For a martial rank, you sure are more powerful than I expected. It's time I got a little more serious. While Zergerev was speaking, Gustav dashed forward again. Pa! Zergerev snapped his fingers, causing an invisible wave to spread around the place. It covered more than 1,000 feet of radius across the vicinity. Cocoon of sound, as he muttered these words. Boom! Gustav was suddenly struck backward as a loud sound exploded in his eardrums. Several hundred feet behind, he landed on the ground with blood oozing out of his ears. Gustav's vision swayed as he tried standing to his feet, only to be assaulted with loud sounds. Every single movement caused a loud sound to be blasted into his eardrums, causing him to pause his movements and hold onto his ears. After so much effort, he finally managed to stand to his feet with his hands covering his ears as he stared at Zergerev in front. Zergerev stood in place with a smile on his face. See, I don't even have to touch you to attack so long as you're under my cocoon. Zergerev happened to be whispering, but every single word he said blasted in Gustav's eardrums loudly regardless of the fact that he was covering his ears. Just what is this power? Gustav wondered as his face squeezed up in pain. His head was ringing due to this, and even his own movements were extremely loud to him, causing him to stand in place. Get lost. The instant Zergerev voiced this out in a normal tone, it blasted across the place like an explosion, sending a sound wave of destruction forward that blasted Gustav backward. The words rang in his ears loudly and kept echoing, disabling him from being able to think properly or perform any actions. Bang! The entire vicinity vibrated intensely as Gustav blasted through the building and landed about 1,000 feet away from his initial location. Zergerev smiled and took a step forward. Bang! The moment his feet made contact with the ground, another sound wave was sent forward, which slammed into the building in front, causing it to be crushed as it started crumbling to the ground. Every single step taken sounded like an atomic bomb going off. At this point, the entire vicinity was caving in due to the force of the sound. Gustav managed to jump to his feet as he spotted a part of the building in front of him collapsing and dodged it. Ugh! Gustav moaned in pain as his ears suffered from the rumbling noise of the building collapsing along with his movement. Blood still kept oozing down his ears as he felt his eardrums might explode anytime soon. Zergerev stood several hundred feet away and stared at Gustav with a look of surprise. If my strength wasn't sealed, you would be dead 10 times over, but it's still mind-boggling that you're still alive even after all this. He was still whispering, but it sounded really loud in Gustav's ears. How long will it take? Gustav asked internally. Almost there. In 5. The system responded. 4. Earlier, Gustav had asked the system if it could shut down his hearing functions. He could bear the physical force from the sound. Still, if it kept messing with his ability to form thoughts and battle strategy, he would eventually lose and die horribly. 1 and 0. Congratulations, you're deaf now, the system announced in his head. Gustav sighed in relief as he finally looked forward and put his hands down. He had never been so grateful for silence as he was now. Zergerev was still whispering up ahead, but now he couldn't hear a thing. Also, his movement didn't give him headaches like before. Gustav's eyes squinted as he glared at Zergerev, who was still whispering. Swoosh! Gustav suddenly charged forward, closing the distance between both of them in an instant as he sent a fist hurling at Zergerev's face. Zergerev was extremely shocked at the sudden sneak attack, but his head was already swerving to the side to dodge Gustav's fist from the instant he moved forward. Every sound in the vicinity couldn't escape Zergerev's hearing, including minor body movements, but Gustav only made a sound at the moment he dashed out, which was what surprised Zergerev the most. Before anyone made a move, their bodies would make certain sounds in preparation for that act. It was impossible to normally hear these sounds, but due to Zergerev having a sound-based bloodline, he would be able to hear these sounds and use them to predict the enemy's actions. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.